sensible way and still be friends. Look out for yourself, should be the rule. Give your heart and your love to whomever you love. Don't be a fool. Darling, why should you cling to some fading thing that used to be? If you can forget, don't worry about me.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call the City Council meeting of October 20th, 2015 to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Francisco, Hart, Hotchkiss, Murillo.
Here.
Rouse. White. Mayor Schneider. Here. Item 1, proclamation declaring October 26 to 30, 2015 as National Red Ribbon Week.
It's a nice event at the Mural Room over the weekend.
Thank you for coming.
So, yeah. The city of Santa Barbara suffers numerous problems associated with alcohol, tobacco, and other drug abuse. And substance abuse is particularly damaging to one of our most valuable resources, our youth, and a contributing factor in these three leading causes of death for teenagers: accidents, homicides, and suicides. And it's the goal of Santa Barbara Fighting Back, CADA, the South Santa Barbara Youth Council, and the Santa Barbara Teen Coalition to involve families, schools, businesses, media, government, medical institutions, faith organizations, law enforcement agencies, and youth service organizations in all aspects of this campaign, and to establish an atmosphere that supports awareness, education, and ongoing initiatives to prevent illegal drug use. And the Red Ribbon Campaign was established by Congress in 1988 to encourage a drug-free lifestyle and involvement in drug prevention efforts in honor of Enrique Kiki Camarena, a Drug Enforcement Administration agent who was murdered in the line of duty. The last week in the month of October is designated each year as National Red Ribbon Week, calling on all Americans to show their support for a drug-free lifestyle by wearing a red ribbon or wristband and participating in drug-free activities during that week. So therefore, I, Helene Schneider, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Santa Barbara, California, do hereby proclaim October 26 to 30, 2015 as Red Ribbon Week in Santa Barbara, California, and encourage all residents to support and participate in alcohol and other drug prevention activities and celebrate the theme, A Healthy Me is Drug-Free. Thank you all for the great work that you're doing in this endeavor. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. And feel free to, and hello there. Good to see you. Good. Feel free to say whatever you'd like.
Mayor Schneider and City Council, thank you very much for the recognition that we do here with our partners in the community to deal with the issues, the challenges of drug and alcohol abuse, and we thank you for the recognition. And what I'd like to do now is three of our people that are heavily involved on the prevention side would like them to talk a little bit about Red Ribbon Week, and you'll notice the flags are flying on State Street. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and City Council. My name is Luis Gomez, and I'm the coordinator for Friday Night Live. This next upcoming week, 15 school sites will be participating in Red Ribbon Week. So students elementary to high school will have the opportunity to pledge to be drug and alcohol free by wearing a wristband that says Be Committed, because that's also our spring campaign. But enough of me. I would actually like to introduce one of our president of our FNL Youth Coalition and president at San Marcos High School, Leslie Magana.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. I'm Leslie Magana. I'm a senior at San Marcos High School. I joined FNL when I was in junior high, and I reflect back now, I feel comfortable admitting that I was at risk student. I remember the peer pressure of getting high and going out to drink. I remember thinking it was normal and acceptable to do it in high school. I soon realized it wasn't. I was able to find the strength and resistance, and I'm so proud to say that I'm alive, healthy lifestyle. The struggles and stereotypes that our youth faces every day in school is unacceptable and almost heartbreaking. It's almost normal to accept that you will go through some kind of harassment, discrimination, self-harm, and insecurities through our 4 years in high school. I don't need to remind you of the lifelong damaging effects. I've seen my own family miss out on life because of the negative environments they were subject to. Perhaps if there had been someone or some group that fostered a healthy environment, just maybe my uncle would have been here today. I watched my aunt struggle with her addiction to this day, and it started when she was in high school. We all have the right to be able to come to school and learn in a safe and healthy environment. This year, Red Ribbon Week at my school will be... we'll have school activities such as a contest, and every day we will pledge to be drug and alcohol free. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes.
Hello, my name is Selena Rockwell. I'm the director of the Youth Service Specialist Program. And just to say a little bit more, all of our high schools and junior high schools have full-time youth service specialists working at those schools, helping students like Leslie, from junior high, really help them get on the right direction and, whether it's through counseling, education. So we do a lot. We have a big effort both for Red Ribbon Week and then also Committed Campaign all throughout the year. We're really helping support students. And I just want to thank you for your support for our students, for our program, and just so wonderful that we get to see the student leaders. They actually plan the events on their campuses. So we do assemblies, we do lots of education, awareness. So just thank you so much for your support.
Thank you very much. Okay. Public comment. I have a number. First off, any changes to the agenda?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay. So public comment. I have a number of speaker slips here. We'll have 2 minutes here at the podium. We'll start with Richard Robinson, to be followed by Scott Wentz.
Honorable Mayor, members, when former Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes said, "Taxes are the price we pay for a civilized society," he may have been speaking more to this latter day than his. Ma'am, greed is not good. The capitalist, warmongering, military industrialists want bigger mansions, yachts, limousines, etc. Good. Freedom, democracy. Donald Trump. Money. Moolah, i.e. revenue. Medi-Cal is underfunded, and other much-needed social programs are not being funded. Proposition 13, property tax cuts, can be unfair, penalizing the lower class. Because Hillary will have a GDP that is estimated to be $15 trillion, when she is sworn in January of 2017, we will be balancing budgets nationwide, chipping away at the national debt. Because we have 27 million living in poverty, the massive inequality of the haves versus the have-nots makes taxes necessary. Because Santa Barbara is a sanctuary established essentially to provide a home for the wealthy of Hollywood who do not want big city like back 100 years ago, it's become a challenge for those who, schizophrenics, etc. They need you to continue receiving Proposition 30 tax funds. Thank you.
Scott Wentz will be followed by Melody Baker.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, Scott Wentz representing Cars Are Basic. God gave you a wake-up call last Thursday when I-5 was shut down It was a wake-up call that you cannot continue to narrow the collateral streets, specifically Cliff Drive, Las Positas, State Street, Kyrial, any of those streets. Because as you saw, the locals, because of the crush of traffic on 101, were using those streets to get around, and there wasn't room. Things like the Melpas roundabout, the Hot Springs roundabout, crushed to a halt. They were very, very inefficient because they were not designed to handle that kind of traffic where a standard intersection is. You have to stop doing the planning that you're doing. I was at a sports medicine conference last weekend. I walked into a conference session and I said, boy, this looks familiar. And I listened to the lady who was giving it, and basically she said exactly what I've been saying about motivation and exercise, that you're not going to get people out doing it. It doesn't make any difference how you redesign the cities. It's not going to happen. And that the medical benefits are not there. Well, guess what? She's an MD. And the thing that she was talking about was a study that I had mentioned a decade ago, presented by Rand Corporation, that proved that wasn't happening. She did the study. She had gone 10 years later, done a more exhaustive study, and came out with exactly the same results. The metabolic effects on this type of planning are not there. And the emergency response, the impact upon commerce, is unconscionable. You have to stop this.
Melody Baker, and then the final speaker will be Crucito Herrera Cruz.
Good afternoon, council members, and our city attorney, our city administrator, and our city clerk. My name's Melody Baker. All along, I have had to fight a planning commissioner even about accusations that I am not who I say I am. I am not what I say I am. I am proud to show today, the light's not coming on this. There it is. Ta-da! Who's not a veteran? I guarantee anyone who now tries to say I am not a veteran, I will take to court. There is my proof. I fought long and hard for 28 years to get my benefits. And I honestly thank the 2 female POWs that were flown back from Afghanistan and interviewed on live TV and admitted they had been on the front line and had been raped. Thank you.
Crucito Herrera Cruz.
Good afternoon, Mayor. Helene Schneider, council members. Buenas tardes, yo soy Crucito Herrera Cruz y estoy corriendo para las elecciones presentes en el municipio de Santa Bárbara por el Distrito 1. Hello, my name is Crucito Herrera Cruz. I am running for District 1 City Council candidacy once again. Once I've learned in 2009 when I had to go against Stephen Philip Wiley in the city for disqualifying me in this election process and not nominating myself during the process, I learned about the California Voting Rights Act. Years later now, we've implemented California Voting Rights Act. This is an important step. I see more community engagement. I see more community involvement. The positive things about district management plans is critical. We have to think about this new opportunity. Now that we have districts, let's create district management plans for 1, 2, and 3. When districts 4 or 5 are implemented in 2017, create the district management plans so we can create public infrastructure needs and improve our human capital needs and human development needs in human services, the public good. In political science, it's called the public good. We can use the district management plans as the tools and the strategies to cover those things that offset the human services, public infrastructure needs in our community. The critical things that I criticize is that the Santa Barbara Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Restaurant Lodging Association censoring candidates from participation. Everyone has a right to speak. Everyone has a duly right to speak when they're a candidate. Again, I'd like to negate Nick Welsh in public comments for censoring any comments that I've made and his poor penmanship as a factorial independent writer. So there's critical aspects. We should talk about not personal politics, but we should talk about the public issues that are affecting our community, because everything in media talks about the personal politics of people. We should talk about the engagement of the public needs. That would be great. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
That concludes public comment. On to the consent calendar. There are no items to read. Is there any item to pull off, or is there a motion for the consent calendar? There's
Second.
Moved by White, second by Murillo. All in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, item number 5.
Review of fiscal year 2017 Human Services and Community Development Block Grant funding priorities, application release, and funding process.
Thank you. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of Council, good afternoon. My name is Liz Stotts. I'm the Community Development Program Specialist, and I'm happy to be here again. We're preparing for fiscal year 2017. Today, staff is recommending that Council provide direction on the funding priorities to help guide the Community Development and Human Services Committee in making the recommendations for funding, approve the dissemination of grant applications, as well as approve the applicant criteria and application review schedule, and establish a funding commitment of $726,150 from the fiscal year 2017 General Fund for the Human Services Program. The City awards grant funds from 2 funding sources. One is federal CDBG funds from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and City Human Services funds. The purpose of the CDBG program is to develop viable urban communities by providing decent housing, a suitable living environment, and expanded economic opportunities. CDBG funds can be used for a wide variety of projects and activities, primarily capital projects such as infrastructure improvements, rehabilitation, and economic development. A small portion of CDBG funds, no more than 15% of the city's allocation, may also be expended on public service activities. In order for an activity to be funded with CDBG funds, it must meet one of the following national objectives. It must primarily benefit persons or residential areas of low and moderate income, eliminate or prevent slums and blight, or meet other urgent local community development needs. In addition to CDBG funds, Council makes available City Human Services funds to award local agencies that provide a wide array of social and public services to city residents that are of low and moderate income. The City Human Services Fund is allocated by Council annually and is augmented with the CDBG Public Service Funds. For fiscal year 2016, Council approved grants for 45 activities. 38 were social service type programs that were awarded with Human Services funds, 3 with CDBG Public Service funds, 3 construction or rehabilitation projects, and 1 economic development program received funding, CDBG funding. Funding recommendations are made to Council by the Community Development and Human Services Committee, who is appointed by Council to analyze and evaluate grant requests and interview applicants before making its recommendations. Council then makes the final decision on funding. Throughout the year, the committee's role also includes monitoring grantees' performance by reviewing 6-month and annual reports, conducting site visits of grantees, reviewing mandatory HUD reports, holding public hearings, and providing input to staff on council needs of this community. To staff and council on the needs of this community. The CDHSC is made up of 13 members who represent a broad range of community interests, including representatives from each of the 4 low-income neighborhoods. The positions marked with an asterisk are currently vacant. 3 applications were submitted during this recruitment cycle, 2 of which are from incumbents. Council previously established the priorities for allocation for human services, public services funds for the CDHSC to follow. First priority are programs that meet basic human needs and or reduce the community impact of homelessness and or reduce the community impact of gang violence via a formal collaboration with the South Coast Task Force on Gangs. Second priority is for programs that are preventative in nature or promote the highest degree of functioning the individual is capable of achieving. At its September 22nd meeting, the CDHSC reviewed the previously adopted funding priorities and recommended that the first priority language be amended. The proposed new language is programs that meet basic human needs and or reduce the community impact of homelessness and or reduce the community impact of gang violence by providing services directly to gang-involved youth. The committee believes that the proposed change more effectively prioritizes programs that work to prevent gang violence by directly targeting gang-involved youth. The rationale for the proposed change is that while many organizations offer programs for young people whose lives may be affected by youth gangs, these organizations may not have formally collaborated with the South Coast Task Force on Gangs. On May 5th of this year, Council approved the city's 5-year consolidated plan for use of CDBG funds. The CDBG specific priorities identified in the 5-year plan will be used for fiscal year 2017 application process and are as follows. Homeless assistance. This is programs that provide services to homeless individuals and families and victims of domestic violence. Public facilities and infrastructure. Capital projects that improve the facilities of organizations that serve low and moderate income residents, and public infrastructure and parks improvements in low and moderate income neighborhoods. And 3, economic development, support of programs that provide self-employment training and small business loans. In order to be eligible, applicants must be tax-exempt organizations or local units of government whose proposals directly benefit City of Santa Barbara residents. Applicants who do not have tax-exempt status may apply under a fiscal umbrella of a tax-exempt organization. Council previously adopted the criteria shown above. Applicants must demonstrate that their proposals benefit city residents who are of low and moderate income, address specific social or physical needs, present a marketing strategy with specific efforts to target ethnic or racial communities, show support from intended clients, identify all funding sources, including funding from other public and private sources, have minimal administrative costs, and identify geographical service areas. In addition, organizations whose request is for staff salaries and meet the local minimum wage will receive an extra credit point. A full description of the applicant criteria is found on attachment 2 of your CAR, and staff is not recommending any material changes to the application criteria this year. Applicants will be evaluated and scored on the above categories. Agency. Applicants will be rated on items such as past performance and administrative overhead. Board. Applicants will be rated on items such as the composition of the board of directors and the board's level of involvement in the organization. On their program, the committee will evaluate items such as the applicant's ability to provide bicultural or bilingual staff, the quality of service and staff capacity. Measurable outcomes. Applicants will be evaluated on whether they identified realistic, measurable results or changes that their clients will experience from receiving the applicant's service. Need. They will be rated on items such as whether there is any duplication of service and whether the applicant collaborates with other agencies. Finances. The committee will evaluate the financial stability of the applicant. For capital proposals, in addition to the above, applicants will be evaluated on the project need, such as who will benefit from the project and whether the applicant clearly identifies the need for the project. And finally, project costs. The committee will evaluate the reasonableness of the project's cost and the project's viability without full city funding. Upon Council's authorization today, a mandatory orientation will be held on November 11th. At this orientation, staff will review the application submittal process and discuss measurable performance outcomes in depth. Applications will be available November 12th, and once again, we will be using the Zoom Grants web-based grant management program. City staff will have immediate online access to the applications that are submitted before the deadline in order to review them and provide feedback to the applicants. This gives applicants an incentive to submit their applications early in order to have the opportunity to correct any errors on their application prior to the due date. The application period will end on December 17th at 4:30 p.m., at which time Zoom grants will be locked and no further submissions will be accepted. The committee will have online access to the applications throughout January prior to the applicant interviews, which will begin at the end of January and continue through the first half of February. The interviews are open to the public, and as always, the committee invites council to attend. In past years, a few applicants have missed their scheduled interview. Citing the importance of information obtained during the interviews, the committee voted to make them mandatory starting this year. Any applicants that fail to appear before the committee will not be allowed to reschedule and will automatically be disqualified for funding. This new requirement has been incorporated into the application review and interview process in Attachment 2 for council approval. After the committee makes its funding recommendations, they will be presented to council on March 22nd during a public hearing. After a period of significant cuts, in the last few years, the city's CDBG allocation has remained relatively level. For fiscal year, the city received $803,372. At this time, staff cannot predict the amount of new entitlement funds the city will be awarded for fiscal year 17. For now, we're anticipating level funding, and the committee generally makes contingency plans to its recommendations based on higher or lower cost than anticipated. Award than anticipated. In the past, council has expressed a desire to increase human services funds by 3% each year to keep up with inflation. However, as a result of economic challenges, council approved level human services funding. Starting in fiscal year 2013, council appropriated $75,000 of human services funds to pay for the city's share of staffing costs for the Central Coast Collaborative on Homelessness. Due to an improvement in the city's fiscal outlook, council has increased human services funding in the last 2 years and committed $705,000 in fiscal year 2016. Staff is recommending a 3% increase for a total of $726,150 for fiscal year 2017. So now, council has the opportunity to take action on the recommendations discussed today, provide any additional direction to staff and the CDHSC for fiscal year 2017 application process. In summary, we ask council to review and establish the funding priorities to provide guidance to the CDHSC, approve the distribution of grant applications, as well as the applicant criteria and the application review schedule, establish a funding commitment for the fiscal year 2017 general fund for the Human Services Program. And this concludes my presentation, and we're happy to answer questions.
Thank you. And do we have any speaker slips? Nope. Okay, so it's to the council for any questions and comments. Mr. Rouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Stotts, on the eligibility criteria, when it talks about local minimum wage, are we talking about the living wage ordinance, or are we talking about the state minimum wage?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Rouse, it's the city's living wage.
Thank you.
Mr. Hart?
Yeah, I just want to recognize the tweaking of the first priority to include the providing services directly to gang-involved youth. I think that's an appropriate change, and I think that will get the services directly into the youth that are in need of those services. And if there's nobody that wants to speak, I would make a motion to approve the staff recommendation.
Thank you.
Is there a second? Yes. Oh, okay. Moved by Hart, second by Rouse. Did you have something?
I did, Madam Mayor. So we're doing comments now?
Yeah, we didn't have any public comments.
Thank you. I did want to note that we have a baby boom in the elementary schools right now, and it is important to keep our gang prevention programs in place. And I do approve of the change that's been suggested by the committee. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, I'm sure everyone will know what mandatory means at this point, so that's going to be a key. So we'll have to remember what that means when we're being told we missed the meeting and could you please make an exception. So just know that up, right? You're telling us now, right? It's mandatory. Mr. Francisco?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As I've noted in the past, I've heard all the reasons. I still believe it's unfortunate that we deal with this major budget item outside of the budget process, and that's why I'll be voting against this motion.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
No. That's so 5-1 with Francisco opposed. Thank you. Thank you very much. Move on to item number 6.
Appeal of Parks and Recreation Commission action to approve removal of 2 setback trees located at 1187 Coast Village Road.
Okay, this is an appeal, so the way, just as a reminder how this will work, we'll have a staff presentation, and I see Ms. Longstreet, Commissioner Longstreet here from the Parks and Rec Commission, and have any comments from Street Tree Advisory Committee and the Parks and Rec Commission. At that point, it'll go to the appellant, and then you have up to 30 minutes for that. And then it goes to the applicant, same amount of time. We'll go to public comment, and then if there's any time left available with the applicant or the appellant, you're allowed to use the balance of that time after public comment. And then when it goes to the council, it's to us unless we ask any of you for questions at that point. But it then stays up here on the dais. So before I get started, I wanted to also say I wanted to let people know I could not make the site visit yesterday, but I did stop by this morning and looked at the trees and actually had a conversation with Mr. Casey on the phone while I was looking at the trees, just so everyone knows that. And I want to ask if anyone else had some ex parte communications on this item. Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I received an advocacy from a lightning strike by Kellum DeForest in support of the trees, and it was just an accidental encounter. But anyway, I did get an advocacy from Mr. DeForest.
Okay, Mr. Rouse.
Likewise, Mr. DeForest got a hold of me too.
All right, lightning struck twice.
That's
then.
right,
Okay.
lightning struck twice.
Mr. Hart.
And it didn't hit 3 times, but I wanted to say I have not had an ex parte communication, but I wasn't also able to attend the staff or the site visit yesterday, but I went by on my own with my staff report. So,
okay.
And Madam Mayor, I was at the COMB meeting yesterday, and but I did get by to look at the trees.
Okay, we all got to look at the trees. Good. So, all right. And with that, we'll move to staff. Ms. Zachary or Mr. Downey.
Mayor Schneider and council members, good afternoon. For an overview of the presentation, we'll be discussing the tree removal application for 1187 Coast Village Road, the relevant municipal code chapter that regulates these trees, appeal issues, and the staff recommendation. On July 10th, 2015, we received the application to remove 3 Canary Island pine trees at 1187 Coast Village Road. The property is zone C1 with a 10-foot setback. The trees are in the minimum front setback and require a permit for removal. The purpose for the removal was proposed construction to driveway, some adjacent walls, some decking, and improving the pedestrian flow to the property. The trees have caused some property damage and create some public safety issues, which we'll go into more detail later. Chapter 15.24, Preservation of Trees, establishes the permitting requirements for the removal of trees. Trees that are within the minimum front setback, historic and specimen trees, parking lot trees, and trees on an approved plan, and trees within a historic district of properties are regulated by this code. Front setback trees and historic and specimen trees, when an application is made for their removal, is reviewed by the Street Tree Advisory Committee and the Parks and Recreation Commission. Parking lot trees and trees on an approved plan are reviewed by the Architectural Board of Review unless they're in a historic or a district or property, in which case they're reviewed by the Historic Landmarks Commission. Each of these review bodies is required to make consider certain things when they're reviewing the materials and the application. Whether the tree is an official historic or specimen tree, the potential size of tree in relation to the lot, number and size of other trees on the site or adjacent city property, any benefits to adjacent trees, whether the tree was planted by or with permission of the applicant, the condition and structure of the tree, and whether the tree canopy can properly grow. In addition to those considerations, the deciding bodies needs to make a finding for the removal. And those are that the removal would adhere to principles of good forestry management, a reasonable and practical development of the property requires the removal, the character of the neighborhood would not be materially affected by the removal, the topography of the building site renders removal desirable, and that the safety of persons or property dictates removal. When a application is submitted, frequently it's for specific reasons, and these are the most common ones. New development or redevelopment of a property. They have a plan for a new landscape and want to change their landscaping. Tree is diseased or hazardous. Hardscape or foundation damage. There's utility interference. The tree may be a fire hazard. It's aesthetically unpleasing, or the tree age or conflict with other trees. At 1187 Coast Village Road, the application was for the 3 trees you see circled in this view. This tree on the left was requested for removal after the initial Street Tree Advisory Committee meeting to look at that tree. The applicant has made some redesigns so that tree can be preserved in place. It is not part of this appeal. The other 2 are part of the appeal. They're both Canary Island pines, and there's construction proposed on all sides of these trees, which we'll go into more detail in a little bit. The Street Tree Advisory Committee, at their regular August 6th, 2015 meeting, reviewed the application materials, did a site visit. They determined they didn't have enough information at that time to make a recommendation. At the special meeting scheduled for this purpose on August 12th, they discussed the degree of root pruning, alternate construction methods to preserve some of the trees, and the tree's condition. After reviewing that and having those discussions, their recommendation, unanimous recommendation, included the removal of 1 tree due to extensive root pruning, the preservation of 1 tree through a redesign, which I previously discussed, and preservation of 1 tree through maintenance. Staff determined that there was some issues with the tree safety and provided a separate recommendation. We determined that the removal of 1 tree would impact a 2nd tree if the commission were to follow the stack recommendation. This is because there's a tree defect which predisposes its safety. The necessary root pruning on all 3 sides of both of these trees. And if 1 tree were removed, there'd be new environmental influences on the 2nd tree. So the staff's recommendation was to approve 2 trees. As you see in this photo, this tree has 2 leaders, 2 trunks. When a tree grows normally, 1 leader tends to take charge and grows first, and then the lateral branches grow second. And over years' time, years of growth, those overlapping tissues where they meet hold the limbs onto the tree. In this case, the tree has 2 leaders, and they both grew at the same time. So they don't have those overlapping tissues in the middle to connect them together, which makes a weak point. The other issue is as these trees get larger, with this acute attachment, the enlarging of the branches themselves begin to push on each other, and that is occurring now in the tree. So the force of the tree growing can tend to push the tree apart. The committee suggested cabling of this tree and preserve it to help mitigate for the defect in the tree. Staff was concerned about that because the tree is already starting to push itself apart. Cabling can only improve the situation. It can't prevent the trees from falling apart. And then if the second tree was, the tree next to it were removed, this tree would have new wind blowing against it in new directions, new sunlight that it didn't have before because of the protection of the other tree. And it would exacerbate the defect in the tree, and the tree very likely would split apart. So staff recommended that both trees be approved for removal. At the August 26, 2015 Parks and Recreation Commission meeting, there were many speakers at that meeting. Speakers included the applicant, project supporters, and those against the tree removals. In their discussions, the commission discussed the damage to the property, the root pruning that had to occur on all three sides of the trees, the proposed replacement trees. They, in their discussions, discussed the principles of the good forest management, the reasonable development of the property for the decking and the repairs to the driveway and a wall that needs to be relocated and repairs to another wall that's damaged by the tree roots. And the pylons that support the second story also are damaged. They discussed the safety of the public. One of the applicants' concerns is that the public uses this driveway next to these trees as a entrance into the facility. It's not designed for that. It's a vehicular entrance. With the pine needles and whatnot that drop down, it creates quite a slippery surface for people to tread on. The commission reviewed all that, listened to the public comment, discussed those items, and concurred with staff unanimously to approve the removal of both trees. The appellant is concerned about several things for the Coast Village Road site. They're concerned with removal of trees, as is the commission and the committee. They're concerned with the rural character of the area. They're concerned that the commission did not make the appropriate findings. As I stated before, the commission did discuss the appeal issues, the removal of the mature trees, the semi-rural character. They considered all the relevant issues pertaining to the tree removal application and the required findings. Therefore, staff recommends that the council deny the appeal and uphold the decision of the Parks and Recreation Commission to approve the removal of the two Canary Island pines, and ask the council make the findings for B and E of the municipal code, that is the reasonable development of the property and the safety of the public dictates removal.
Thank you. And we have Commissioner Longstreet and Street Tree Advisory Committee member Des O'Neill, if you'd like to come up at this point and make whatever comments you'd like.
Good afternoon. The Parks and Recreation Commission discussed these trees thoroughly and made comments that directly state the findings. Chair Wiscombe, the STAC liaison who attended both the STAC site visits, strongly supported the staff recommendation and talked about the reasonable development of the property, the safety of the trees, especially referencing the double leader, and the principles of good forest management. Commissioner Heaton asked directly about the principles of good forest management. Commissioner Clark discussed the project being an asset to the area. My comments mainly focused on safety. After a site visit, my concern was the amount of root pruning required in the driveway and the amount of damage visible at the site. The Commission was appreciative of the design changes made to save the third tree. The Commission voted unanimously to support the staff recommendation to remove the two trees because the request meets the required findings. We took the expert opinion of the city arborist that these two trees would not be safe with the amount of root pruning necessary for the project, and that the removal of one tree would contribute to the destabilization of the other tree. I feel strongly that this decision meets all the city's criteria for removal. And today I made another site visit just to assure myself, and my feelings are the same today as they were that day. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. O'Neill?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I'm the present chair of the Street Tree Advisory Committee. And in the course of our 2 visits and sessions regarding these trees, we discussed everything at great length, including the findings that are before you. Our principal concern anytime we go out is to preserve trees. Anybody will tell you that we do not lightly agree to the removal of trees. We take this seriously. In this situation, we were very, very firm about the tree to the west, the single tree. It doesn't show up very well, but it's a beautiful tree, and it's not part of the discussion here. We're talking here about the 2 trees to the east. We preliminarily elected to approve the removal of one of those trees and to retain the double trunk tree in place. That was our vote in committee after the second meeting, the special meeting. However, afterwards, the city arborist notified us of the staff recommendation which was going to be made. And to be honest, I think it's probably a better one than our own decision. I hope the members of my committee won't feel that I've stabbed them in the back, but the considerations that the staff took into had in mind, I think are persuasive. The tree would be weakened. The extensive root pruning in particular is a concern. There will have to be new walls put in around there, and in the course of that, both trees will be pruned on at least 3 sides. And I think I, too, would be in support of the staff recommendation to allow the removal of both trees and the replacement after the work is done on the driveway and the new retaining walls are installed with one replacement tree as recommended. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Any questions for staff? Could you put the picture of the tree back up? So did you look at the opportunity of trimming the one trunk over the other, or would that be too much to remove from one tree in order to save the tree as a whole, if you understand where I'm saying because that would then remove the issue of the 2 trunks working against each other, right?
Mayor Schneider and council members, the removal of one of the trunks completely is possible. It would be a similar action to the removal of the tree adjacent to it, and having new influences on the tree from wind and sun patterns. Frequently when trees are removed and adjacent trees are left without in those exposures, they fail both branches and trunk. Interesting thing in the forests, when they started putting roads through the forests, they would remove swaths of trees to create these roads, and they found that the trees adjacent to the roadways were falling over. This is the same phenomenon. It creates those influences on the trees that aren't used to those influences, and it would be an impact for the safety of the tree.
So the removal of one trunk would create new influences around wind and sun to the rest of that tree, and because I thought you said earlier the concern was the 2 trunks kind of competing against each other and creating a safety hazard, or am I misunderstanding?
Mayor Schneider, it's both.
It's both. Okay. Yes. Okay. And just process why the staff recommendation came after the Street Tree Advisory Committee meeting and not before.
Mayor Schneider and council members, staff doesn't typically make a separate recommendation to the Parks and Recreation Commission unless there's outstanding issues that the committee was not aware of or feels strongly that there is a need to make a separate recommendation. So it's not commonplace for staff to make a separate recommendation, but we felt it was important in this situation.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Dennis, so I understand it. is it the combination of the root pruning as well as the removal of the tree farthest to the east that can compound some problem? In other words, with the bifurcated tree there, if there were no root pruning, just the removal of the other tree, would that still have that exposure effect you're talking about, or is it the combination of it? And I'm trying to kind of get a grip on this.
Mayor Schneider, Councilmember Rouse, all of those items will have a factor on the tree. The root pruning is something, especially on multiple sides of a tree, that creates stabilization issues for the entire tree. The defect creates issues for the stability of a good portion, 50% of that tree. The influence of the wind, all these things add up to strikes against the safety of this tree. They have a cumulative effect. There was an arborist report submitted as part of the submissions by the applicant, which was separate and independent, and that arborist also, aside from any other tree removals, recommended removal of this tree because of the safety issues of the defect alone. So when you add the root pruning to that and the other construction work, it really exacerbates the problem.
Okay, thank you. So to the appellant, if you'd like to come on up, you have up to 30 minutes here, and there's a clock there at the podium. Good afternoon.
Mayor Schneider and council members. My name is Cindy Feinberg, and as president of the Montecito Association, I'm here today to appeal the decision to remove 2 healthy, mature pine trees on Coast Village Road. The reason the board of directors of the Montecito Association decided to appeal the decision to remove the trees can be found in our mission statement, which reads, "The Montecito Association is an organization committed to leading the community in the preservation, protection, and enhancement of the semi-rural character of Montecito." We are concerned about safety, so I just want to let you know that we do understand the nature of the trees. The pine trees in question are a significant landmark on Coast Village Road, and they do play a major role in maintaining a semi-rural feel on that street. In addition, research shows that mature trees capture more carbon, filter more particulate matter to reduce air pollution, capture more stormwater, create shade to mitigate the impact of heat islands, which we don't have too many of those, of course this year we have, and reduce energy use and many other environmental and health benefits. We feel it is imperative to deny the removal of the pine trees in order to protect and preserve the character of Coast Village Road. I said this at the earlier meeting, and this is something that's very important to us. We do not want Coast Village Road to become another strip mall with just little small potted trees. This is one of the major trees for the character of that street and thus our community. Now, I am very concerned about safety, and I've done my research about the trees, and I don't think anyone here really knows the answer. These trees exist for many, many years. I read a story at Indiana University where an arborist had the report, it was a young arborist, went to school to learn about the safety of the trees. And you know what? Next thing he did, he started cutting down all the trees. And the professor of the university said, the president of the university said, "What's happening?" Well, every tree is unsafe for some reason, if you look at it from that perspective. So we really have to balance what's safe and what is not. There is a defect in this tree. Can it be saved by cabling? Well, it's a first measure. I cannot guarantee it would be safe for another 100 years, but I know it would protect the public in the short term. And then we see what happens. It needs to be inspected annually. A split would not happen, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that if it's cabled, a split would happen immediately. It happens over time. But the nature of this tree and the character of the community, I think, is worth taking that chance on that tree to protect it, to preserve the character. I'm going to now hand it over to Victoria Green, who's our executive director, who will give you more detail on our appeal.
Good afternoon, Mayor Schneider and council members. The Montecito Association filed this appeal because the trees along Coast Village Road, and these trees in particular, are a significant visual resource. Their removal would be detrimental to the character of the street, and we believe that not enough attention has been given to alternatives that could avoid removal of these significant skyline trees. As you can see from the slide on the screen with the pine trees on the left side, this section of Coast Village Road is characterized by a wide expanse of pavement, a few trees, and very little additional landscaping. You can see the lack of additional landscaping along the project site frontage that's looking to the east, with the trees in question in the back of the frame. So the few existing trees along the south side of the parking area provide important visual relief, shade, and cooling, as Cindy mentioned. The Canary Island pines in question have a large, beautiful canopy, and I think this picture shows it best. The city's general plan and municipal code have long acknowledged the importance of retaining skyline trees, and in fact, the city's environmental resources element requires development to be sited and designed to preserve existing mature, healthy, native, and non-native trees to the maximum extent feasible. I would submit that there are alternatives to this project that would allow the retention of the trees on the east side of the property. What those would include would be revisions to or elimination of the proposed seating deck that would be located within the front yard setback at the eastern end of the property. And if it's true that work necessary to raise the grade of the entrance driveway would truly be an issue for the stability of either of those pine trees, then we believe that perhaps those existing grades on the driveway should be retained, or the driveway should be closed. That is just an entrance drive. There's access to the parking area for the building from Coast Village Circle, and that's really where people have to exit from today anyway. With respect to the health of these trees, there's really no question that they're currently thriving. I think you all had the chance to go out there and see them, and you see how green they are. We don't see a lot of green these days in our town or in our state. The experts on your Street Tree Advisory Committee found that the hazard associated with the codominant stem, the double stem of that one tree, could be addressed through cabling, and we believe that that's a much better solution. We disagree that the trees present hazards that only can be addressed through their removal. So we believe that there are options available to you today that would allow for retention of these significant trees. We believe these trees are irreplaceable over the short and near term, and perhaps even over my lifetime. And given that the subject property is already reasonably developed and the applicant is not proposing any new square footage, just revisions to that driveway and a deck that are affecting this tree, we ask that you grant this appeal and overturn the action of the Park and Recs Commission and vote to retain the Canary Island pine trees here. And I did just want to clarify, there's talk of impacts on all three sides, and I was not present at the meetings, but have reviewed the record that is available. As I understand it, along the sidewalk frontage, ABR would like the low wall removed. It's not a retaining wall, it's a site wall along the sidewalk. They want additional space. They want 18 inches for landscaping. Now there's 10, but they would like to have 18 inches there. So that's removing an existing wall that is not retaining earth. I believe there's some pilings on the building side that may need work and that could encroach into the root zone of those trees. And then really the work that has the potential to affect roots would be that work on the driveway. The driveway is proposed to have the grade raised, so there would be removal of asphalt, perhaps some root trimming in that location. That alone is enough to destabilize these trees. I have a hard time accepting. I know that often we allow up to 30-50% encroachment within the root zones of oak trees, which are much more sensitive, and they recover just fine with proper care and methodology to treating those trees. So that's what I have. If it's acceptable, I do have an email communication that Jamie Brown asked me to read to you. Thank you. She says, please do not let the trees on Coast Village Road get cut down. They are survivors of the worst drought ever, and your action will be their reward. Don't give them the axe. City Council needs to do all they can to support our environment, and cutting down trees unnecessarily does not reflect that allegiance. For my neighbors, over 200 citizens who live in a residential section of Montecito adjacent to Coast Village Road and directly across from this project, these important trees stand as a buffer to noise from the freeway and trains and provide a filter of the train and freeway soot. They add to the quality of life in our area and to the character of Coast Village Road. Please, we do not need an outdoor cafe nearly as much as a lovely protective tree. Save the established beauty of Santa Barbara. Be a tree hugger. Jamie Brown, Captain, High Road Neighborhood Watch. Thank you. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to try to address them.
Okay. Any questions? Great. Not for now. Thank you. All right. And the applicant?
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. My name is Heidi Jones. I'm the agent for the applicant, and I'm with Suzanne Illich Planning and Permitting Services. In an effort to not be too repetitive with what Mr. Downey has covered, I will try not to get into too much detail and go through my slides a little more quickly. I want to be efficient with your time. And I do want to make a few points. We value trees too. We don't want to remove mature trees either. We went through a very careful, considerate, thoughtful process in developing this site with our design team and our project team. And as noted, we were able to retain and redesign the stairway that's here on the other end to save that tree. If there was some alternative footing or design or something we could have done on the other side to retain, we would have done it. But I believe there's two important things going on here. One, that absent any project that we're doing, there is a safety hazard. And my understanding in talking to Mr. Downey and Mr. Wynn, who is our consulting arborist, that double-leader tree is a safety hazard, and that we can't necessarily remove one without the other, creating the additional exposures, et cetera. So if we leave them, I think that leaves a level of liability, and what do we do with that? Secondly, just pointing out that the project's not necessarily driving this tree removal. Yes, the trees ultimately we have requested them to be removed, so we would develop a nice deck, and we would like to improve the driveway, which we believe is a reasonable request. So with that, I'd like to just briefly walk you through an overview of the goals and the objectives of these tenant improvements to enhance Coast Village Road. It's kind of an outdated strip mall as it is. So it'll get kind of a refresh. New paint, new windows, a nice dining outdoor space that is engaging. It promotes connectivity. What's not shown yet, because we just haven't been able to update our rendering, is the addition of the 18-inch planter that ABR requested. So that existing low wall will just be pushed back. It will remain, but that will have some nice green buffer space in it and allow some more greenery, along with proposed replacement tree. We want to encourage interaction with the streetscape, encourage a good sense of place, and that's all consistent with the city's pedestrian master plan goals. This shopping center currently has 27 tenants. It's a mix of retail, restaurant, and offices. Would note that we are going to have some future changes of use in tenants where we will have an increase in restaurant space. So having these outdoor dining decks, and I'll show you a lower deck shortly, is good to have some good outdoor space. Improvements also include accessibility upgrades, which are needed, structural repairs to columns and beams on site, stormwater management, just a good refresh. This lower level patio, again, will have outdoor seating for patrons. It's inviting. Our landscape plan will be removing about a little over 1,000 square feet of non-water-wise plantings and installing about 70% more landscape overall on the site for a total of 3,245 square feet of all water-wise landscaping. And the proposed replacement tree is also a water-wise tree. As you can see, the existing steep entry driveway, we would like to improve it. People do walk down it. People do drive down it, and you can see they kind of scrape their car here. They also scrape it at the top. The existing grade is about 28% in the first 20 feet of the driveway, a maximum of 30%. We'd like to get it to 14%, which is the closest we can get to the city standard of 12. This is a main access off Coast Village Road, so it is nice for these businesses and these tenants to have easy parking available to them. Here's a rendering elevation of existing versus proposed. Absent the eucalyptus trees in the foreground, we believe this is an enhancement of what's currently there, an improvement upon the current condition. We have been through an extensive review process and gone through public hearings through 4 different city advisory boards and committees. As noted, ABR, the staff hearing officer for the front yard setback for the dining decks, Street Tree Advisory Committee, and Parks and Rec Commission, as you know. The project was supported through all of these processes. And a couple things to note. Initially, we went to ABR. The replacement planting was an acacia, and that was changed to what's proposed now, which is the flame tree. I'm not going to attempt the Latin name because I'll butcher it. They also supported the front setback modification and the plantings between the sidewalk and the deck, as I mentioned. The staff hearing officer also believed the proposed decks of the site improvement were appropriate, that they did not add mass, that it retained a nice visual appearance of the setback. They addressed some of the slope topography between the first and second levels, and they maintained the character of the neighborhood. As I noted, we ended up obtaining a third-party arborist report post Street Tree Advisory Committee and Parks and Rec Commission to kind of feel out and get our own understanding of what staff's recommendations were and what really was the situation. And Peter Wynn prepared that report. He is a certified arborist and on the city's consultants list. He came to the same conclusions, essentially, that city staff did, that there's some structural imperfections, that these 2 trees actually share a canopy and root system. If you stand underneath them, you look up, they all have one-sided branches. And actually, the tree closest to the driveway is leaning. So if we were to try and save one of the trees and not the other and remove one, which we obviously looked into, you'd be left with a one-sided tree in either way. So we worked really hard to kind of look at all sides of that. He did come to the conclusion it was a hazard with the codominant and recommended the removal. We did meet with the Montecito Association in the spirit to come to a conclusion and not come before you today, as much as we like seeing you. We wanted to discuss their concerns. We provided them additional information. The arborist report gave them some more background and context that wasn't in the public record, and understood that they had some concerns with the proposed replacement tree species. We let them know we'd be happy to look into a different species in coordination with the ABR. But actually, we feel the proposed tree is fairly appropriate. It's water-wise. It's also on the city fire department list of preferred species from a fire safety standpoint. And I did speak with Jim Austin at City Fire. And the current pine trees he felt were a fire hazard, and he also supported removal because they would act as a fire ladder in the event of a fire. Here's the trees, which we've seen plenty of, I'm sure. Now, why we are here today. The Montecito Association letter mentions that they don't believe the appropriate findings were made at the Park and Rec Commission, and as you've heard from staff and some people from the actual commission, we believe those findings were made, specifically related to principles of good forest management, that reasonable and practical development of the property is being considered, and that there is a safety concern. Also discussed at the meeting was the neighborhood character, and it was mentioned a minute ago about the strip mall. At the Park and Rec Commission meeting, someone mentioned that this looks, we don't want a strip mall in Montecito, we want to enhance it. Well, we kind of felt, and somebody mentioned, that we feel like we're moving away from the existing strip mall look and that we're enhancing that, and that this is a unique project. So we don't believe the neighborhood character will be determined. So quickly, if I can.
The implications of removing the one next to the driveway and not removing that, as Mr. Downey had talked about, really falls under, safety categories. So I think between the reasonable development of the property, which is certainly a code in our code, and also safety issues, which are in our code, I think, and I guess I'd go so far as to say best practices for urban forest management in terms of, you don't want to compromise one by removing the other. So I absolutely support staff's recommendation.
So in conclusion, again, we agree that there's an existing safety hazard that we're concerned about with the codominant trunks. We understand that to be kind of an industry standard concern with the liability. If we leave them, how do we work around them? We believe that the proposed driveway improvements are reasonable. I think it's human nature if you're driving by a business or a restaurant that you want to go to, that you want to have easy access to parking. And if somebody's driving by this and they can't use this driveway or don't use it because it's a hazard, it's not good for the businesses that are there. We believe that we've been through due process in balancing aesthetics and safeties. We've been to 7 hearings. This one will be our 8th. We think this is an improvement upon existing conditions. We think this request has been carefully considered by all. Again, we don't take this removal request lightly. We trust the professionals involved, your city arborist, your appointed committee commissioners, and our project arborist who analyzed it and collectively agree to support the removal of the trees. We believe the required findings were made. And we also understand the driving force behind the appeal. Nobody wants to see beautiful trees taken down. But we believe that it's misguided given the circumstances and the facts of what's really going on with the safety hazard, and we'd hope that you uphold the approval and deny the appeal. We're here if you have any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Rouse has a question.
Ms. Jones, I don't know if you have a rendering or any way you could describe it for us, but the height and girth of the current trees, the way they look in elevation, versus what you have proposed to replace them with. I don't know if there's any way we can get a perspective on that.
Sorry, I wish I could blow up this rendering here on the top. You can see the proposed on the left side of the screen is the proposed replacement tree, which is the flame tree. Or I don't know what age that is, and perhaps our arborist can speak more to that, but the one on the right is the existing pine. My understanding is that the proposed flame tree can get as tall as that eventually. And we don't necessarily want a species that grows taller faster to kind of replace that space or that skyline immediately, because then you create a tree that has shallower, wider roots and are left with the same problem where you have damage to a structure, a driveway.
And so that I understand the timeline as well. When your arborist concurred with our arborist, or the city's arborist, on the danger to the bifurcated tree, your original plan, however, called for removing just one of the trees and leaving the bifurcated, whatever you want to call that tree, with the 2 trunks. So did your arborist conclude that once ours did, or did they conclude them separately and came up with the same conclusion? How did that all come about in terms of the timing?
Yeah, initially we did not prepare an arborist report. We went through the process, and it seemed kind of obvious that the impacts from the grading associated with the driveway improvements would clearly impact the tree closest to the driveway. I didn't know, and I don't think we really fully understood the hazard of the codominant trunk tree until we started going through the street tree committee process, and then through Parks and Rec Commission trusting staff's recommendation and their understanding of that tree being a hazard. So we obtained the approval, and when the appeal was filed, we thought, we better get another opinion so that we fully understand what that means in terms of removing it.
Thank you.
Mr. Francisco?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Downey, since I don't think, is there any other arborist in the house? Mr. Downey, is there?
Mr. Wynn, our arborist is here, Peter Wynn.
So what I would like, Mr. Downey, if you can answer this. So first, how old would you estimate the existing trees are? And how long do you think it would take the described replacement tree to reach the sort of height that's shown in this rendering?
Mayor Schneider and council member, excuse me, council members, the proposed tree is a 36-inch box. It is typically 15 to 20 foot tall when it's installed. As it establishes and begins to grow, it can achieve the height of the existing pine trees on the left side of the property there. That process can take 20, 30 years before that occurs. These trees are 40 to 60 years old currently.
Okay. Anybody else have a different opinion on that? Okay. Thanks very much.
And I would note, we are, again, I mentioned we are open to a different type of replacement, perhaps a native, a sycamore, or some other type, if that's the direction that is received in coordination with the ABR.
Mr. Hart, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do have a question. I guess for Mr. Downey, what are the designated street trees in the parkway adjacent to this property?
Mayor Schneider and Councilmember Hart, the designated tree in this is actually varies. There's quite a few number of trees designated. The median strip between the frontage road and the actual Coast Village Road is larger, so there's a group of larger trees that are designated for that strip. The space in the sidewalk is much smaller, so there's a group of smaller trees. So it's actually quite a few variety of trees that are designated.
What's designated for the median?
I don't have that information. I'm sorry.
Is there a way you can get that while we're talking?
We can make a call to the office.
Okay, if you would, that'd be helpful, I think, for later.
We have some public comment, so you have some time to figure that out. So thank you very much. Speaking of, we'll go to public comment right now, and if there's 2 minutes here at the podium, we'll start with Jennifer, I think it's DeSandre, to be followed by Karen Quinn. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer DeSandre. I can't add anything to what's already been said as far as safety and this and that, but I do want to make a comment that this property was purchased by owners that are willing to expand some money, some time in revitalizing this strip mall, which is very tired and does need a lot of work. I think that we have thoroughly studied the health and safety of the trees. They're your experts. I think that that's not what's in question here, whether the trees need to be removed or not. Possibly what's in question is what we're going to replace them with. But I think there are members of the public that really want to see this go forward, want to see this project clean up Montecito, and are looking forward to taking the trees out and moving. Thank you.
Karen Quinn will be followed by Tracy Crane.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Again, to reiterate, just the public safety that's in question here is certainly something that I agree with and definitely want to support the removal of the trees. But looking at the renderings of what the project is going to look like, I'm very impressed in looking at the replacement trees and the openness of both parties to such trees that would suffice. I think it's a really good project and looks really great and has a lot of good potential for the public. But I do want to say that I support the removal based on the safety, public safety. Thank you.
Tracy Crane will be followed by Rob Kooiman.
Good afternoon. I do support the approval by the Parks and Recreation Commission to remove the trees. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob Kooiman will be followed by Marie Shoemaker.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I ask that you support the Park Commission's finding and deny the appeal.
Okay. Marie Shoemaker, Trey Pinner, and then the final speaker will be Lee Artman.
Mayor Steiner and council members, I am reading excerpts from a letter that I wrote as well as some of the tenants, and because I only have 2 minutes, it will be very truncated, so forgive me for that. The owners of 1187 Coast Village Road hired my firm, Evans ID, to make improvements to the property for the health and safety of the public and to bring vibrancy to the property. The safety issues that we are addressing are accessible path of travel, replacing damaged columns and guardrails, regrading the east driveway, and replacement of the 2 existing canary pine trees. One thing, I'm jumping forward, ABR board member Courtney Jane Miller also expressed that the existing planters are not doing their job to support them appropriately, the 2 trees together. ABR members also said, the large arching staircase is a great improvement, a real enhancement. That was Scott Hopkins. Stephanie Poole said, I architecturally love the new proposal for the dining areas. Amy Fitzgerald Tripp commented, the improvements are architecturally an improvement to the layout, especially the stairs and patios. This is from the owner of the tennis shop. The property affords what I consider the best parking along Coast Village Road. Typically, my customers will first try to park on the street, but during peak hours and on days when there are social events along Coast Village Road, street parking is iffy at best. So my tenants will be using the existing driveway, albeit in its current state of disrepair, to park behind the building. The owners have shown me their planned improvements for the driveway. Decreasing the grade is it's very dangerous now, and removing these existing broken and cracked asphalt and replacing with concrete. This is a warranted and needed improvement to the parking, and I strongly encourage the council to endorse this renovation, even if it entails removing the pine trees adjacent to the driveway.
Thank you. Thank you. Trey Pinner?
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Thank you for your opportunity to speak today. Myself am a property owner along Coast Village Road and a property manager along Coast Village Road. I'm currently the vice president of the Coast Village Business Association, so I have a lot of interest in this area of the tree and this project. I have been tracking the project. I myself actually was at the ABR meetings regarding this project. And as a manager on the road and as a member of the Coast Village Business Association, we're very excited about this project and what this will do for Coast Village Road. Reiterating the safety concerns, as someone who manages property, I can tell you that is a big concern. And it's something that should not be taken lightly, the safety involved. And even the issue just to the pine needles. I've been in situations where things like these pine needles on this driveway can cause a very slippery condition. Coincidentally, I used to manage this property 10 years ago. So I have firsthand knowledge of this property, very, very in-depth knowledge of this property. And I can tell you it's a very difficult access. So what they're trying to do with this driveway, correct the conditions of this driveway, is imperative to the proper operation, safe operation of this property. We also feel that this improvements to the property will ultimately be a great addition to the neighborhood, including the neighborhood of the neighbors across the street who are looking out at this tree, or this current large tree, will see a beautiful project. I think it's important to note that right behind the project is a large sycamore tree. And it kind of didn't show in that picture because the pine tree's blocking it. So there is a view of a tree that will now actually probably be more enhanced, a large sycamore tree just on the back side of the property. So I too am not here in support of killing trees, but I also am in support of making projects better, finding ways to enhance the entire area, and with this new tree replacement, I think that'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Lee Artman?
Afternoon. My name is Lee Artman. Thank you for your time. Is it possible to get this photograph up there? That's on that. I've lived on Coast Village Road for 20 years. I can't believe we're going to take those 2 trees down to add a deck. It's sacrilegious. The sycamore that this gentleman just spoke of, I live across the
You need to speak in the mic because we're taping.
sycamore this gentleman spoke of is 1/10 the volume of this tree. I'm very familiar with it. I've looked at it for 20 years. The fire department, the applicant said, the fire chief said this is going to be a fire ladder, Now I've heard it all. We're going to take all trees down because they're fire ladders. We're going to take those trees down because it's a fire ladder. It's ridiculous. This is the south entrance right here. You take those trees down, it dramatically changes the character of that street. Thank you.
Thank you. The applicant, do you have any other final comments? Do you have some time available? Or, I'm sorry, the appellant first. I do that. Sorry.
Thank you. I just want to, for the record, say that the Montecito Association doesn't have concerns about upgrading this property. We think that those upgrades are long overdue, and we're happy to see those move forward. Our concerns are very specific. We think the project can move forward with some modifications to that deck area and some careful work on the driveway and save those 2 pine trees. So we'd ask that you grant our appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. And the applicant, any other final comments?
I would just like to say that we appreciate your time today. I think that everybody would hate to see these trees go if the approval is upheld, but the appropriate replacement tree, any impact to shade or visual impact from missing a tree would be short term. We would have an appropriate replacement species that would be an overall improvement. I think what we are requesting is reasonable, and there's a safety hazard to be addressed. So I'll leave it in your wise and capable hands. Thank you.
Okay. It's to our wise and capable hands. It's to the council. Mr. Francisco.
I'll jump right in. Obviously, nobody wants to see beautiful trees removed. This is Santa Barbara, and this is a commercial area that benefits from good landscaping, and trees are a very large part of that. On the other hand, it's, I would say in my experience, unusual for our arborist to come to us and tell us that he agrees that trees need to be removed for safety reasons. And I am not an arborist, so I don't really have a professional opinion on this, but I do have to, I have to listen to professionals when they tell me that there is a safety issue. That is one of the most important things we deal with. And I believe that the property owners should not be saddled with a safety problem by us. They have enough issues to deal with. So I also want to say, and the Montecito Association clearly agrees with this, that the improvements that we're talking about that the owner is carrying out or plans to carry out will be a considerable improvement to this building. I've been there many times, and having some outdoor seating and having some landscaping in front is going to considerably improve the streetscape in front of that building. I also believe that I know that driveway, it's very steep, and that is the only access from Coast Village Road. Obviously, you can get there from Coast Village Circle as well in the back, but it's the only access from Coast Village Road to the large parking lot on the lower level behind 1187. So that change, I think, is an excellent one and long needed. And the combination of circumstances here seem to indicate that it will cause a dangerous condition with the existing trees where they are. So, as I said, I think we're always reluctant here in Santa Barbara to remove trees. Nobody wants to do that. But I think that the proposed replacement, it sounds like in some reasonable amount of time, God willing, while I'm still alive, will be a similar height and similar size to what's there today. So I would agree with staff recommendations and the Park and Rec Commission's recommendation that for safety reasons these two trees be removed.
Mr. Hart?
I think staff had a chance to get some information about the street trees in the median. Could you help me with that species?
Councilmember Schneider and Councilmember Hart, Mayor Schneider and Councilmember Hart. The designated tree for this block is Photinia fraseri, which is a medium-sized tree. There are opportunities to plant larger trees than that in that median strip. It's an effort that we certainly could move forward through the Street Tree Advisory Committee and Parks and Recreation Commission to designate other trees that can attain some larger stature in that area. I misspoke earlier that it was a different block that we designated the various trees.
Okay. Well, I guess where I'm going is that I think that is an opportunity to put back some of the skyline tree potential in that neighborhood. If you have the photograph that looks at the trees that has the empty median parkway and you put that up, you can see there are a lot of opportunities for large trees to be planted in that area. And I think it's an appropriate mitigation for the loss of the skyline tree. It is unfortunate, and I agree that our staff rarely is in support of taking out large skyline trees like this. We very often, our bias in our process is to protect those, but there is a balancing act involved in this project. And I think that I get the sense that the applicant is open to trying to work something out to meet the needs of what they're trying to accomplish for the program. I completely understand the concerns of the neighbors and the Montecito Association about wanting to protect the rural quality, the visual quality of that neighborhood is unique, and the medians provide a unique opportunity to put back some street trees. So I'd be interested in knowing if the applicant would be willing to pay for some box skyline trees to put into the median area, and if we can have some kind of a description of an additional condition. Are we going to be bringing this back for conditions later, or is this the final action tonight? Today?
Madam Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem Hart, you could bring it back if you wanted to massage further conditions, but you have the authority to conditionally approve the removal today.
Okay. Well, I'm interested in something like that, forging some kind of compromise where we could put back some of the green space on the road, have that be more significant ultimately than what exists today, and just be curious what my colleagues think about that kind of option.
Mr. Rouse? Get start.
May we get a response from the applicant on Mr. Hart's suggestion?
Okay.
Yes, we would absolutely be open to some median street tree plantings.
Okay. Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, yeah, Mr. Hart I agree completely, and I was thinking of the same thing, something substantial in the median strip to enhance the skyline, maybe a nice solution or a nice compromise, not a solution per se. I think from what I understand from staff and the presentations, it really is a matter of the project versus the trees. I don't think you can do both because of we've seen what's happened with root damage and other types of excavations where the trees eventually get defoliated and then fail. And I really think that right now, tree safety versus aesthetics is going to be a really big subject as we approach this El Nino season. So tree safety is something we're going to be talking about a lot. So I do not like the idea of taking out these very stately and large established trees. However, I also don't like the idea of leaving that strip mall as status quo. I like the idea that somebody's about ready to try to enhance that and do something better. So I think there is a compromise out there. It sounds to me like the applicant is willing to play ball. So there may be some middle ground here that comes. Well, you never make everybody happy, but comes darn close. Thank you.
Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with the comments that my colleagues have made. In particular, I think the median is an opportunity for, I think there are some Citriodora along there, which are nice skyline trees that don't interfere with sight lines, with traffic and such. I think also a point that I would respectfully want to add to the appellant's conversation is that driveway, that area is in the hopscotch of farmers market, and so that sometimes is useful for the parking as it gets jammed up during the farmers market time. So keeping that driveway as an in driveway is just an important piece of the puzzle there, and so cutting that off as was suggested by the Montecito Association, I don't think is a reasonable option, and so for safety reasons. Again, I just share the thoughts that my colleagues have made about the trees. It's disappointing to see them go, but it's great to see this complex that is very much very dated and tired, as one person said, getting spruced up is going to be a real addition to Coast Village Road. So I will be supporting the project.
Ms. Maria?
Thank you, Mayor Schneider. I appreciate the effort of the Montecito Association to save the trees, and it's closer for me than what I'm hearing here. I would really like to say rearrange the decks and save the trees. And I stood in their shade yesterday, so I definitely appreciate them. But taking into consideration that the sycamore will provide some relief, the need for driveway improvement and the other safety concerns, I would vote to deny the appeal. Thank you.
Mr. Francisco, did you have something else? Go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate Mr. Hart's and some of my fellow colleagues' comments about improvements to the median. I know, however, that the Coast Village Business Association has been talking about this for quite a while, talking with some folks at the city. I think I'm all in favor of making that a better median, but I think that's a bigger discussion than anything that we could come up with here at council. And I would certainly be in favor of expressing the wish that we focus on whatever planning work is necessary to improve the Coast Village Road medium. I think that's a great idea. I don't think that we can say, well, you should put 3 trees there. I think that there needs to be some consistent planning for the entire median strip there. And I think that would be, I'm sure the Coast Village Business Association would be very happy if the city were to take that up. But I do think that we should take up some planning effort along those lines rather than just saying we're going to do this here today to compensate.
Mr. Hart?
Well, I understand that concern, and I don't want to short-circuit a planning process. On the other hand, I think this is an opportunity, and I think there's a mitigation nexus between this project and the lack of the need for replacement skyline trees at a faster, more robust pace. So I'm open to direction from staff as to a process without engaging on a complete redesign of the median planters. Is there a way we can have this come back as part of the conditions of approval at a subsequent date that'll give us a path forward?
Zachary or Mr. Casey?
Yeah, or maybe we want to hear from the applicant one more time. Seems like they have.
Okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to note that we'd be happy to coordinate any future plantings in the median with the association themselves and help work with that plan to contribute to it. So we have a comprehensive plan for the whole medium, because I understand that needs to be a big picture.
And Madam Mayor, one way to do it would be to refer this back to the Street Tree Advisory Committee and the Parks and Recreation Commission to engage the Coast Village Business Association as well and identify if there's opportunities for some trees to be planted in this immediate area.
Okay. Mr. White?
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. And also, of course, there is a landscape architect customarily on our ABR, so that's another source of expertise there. And we do have, it is, Coast Village Road is in its own right is dated in its design. And but we do see along there eucalyptus, and as I recall, also sycamore is in the median as well. And so those are at least 2 that, and it's as I think we heard from our arborist, there is a bit of a hodgepodge along there. It's a sweet hodgepodge, and it's our hodgepodge, so that's great. But I think we can fit things into that now, and when, as Mr. Hart said, this is an opportunity that would then grow and add to that line of neat skyline trees that we have in the median so far. And I was quite surprised, in fact, as I looked at the photographs, and I didn't notice that in my site visit, that this is empty, and that there is an empty canvas there, as one might say. So I support going forward now with a responsive process that brings in Coast Village Road Business Association, so we're not losing track of that, our design and review folks. But I don't need it to come back here, just as long as it goes through the process in a expeditious way, so that the project can move forward.
I'll just add, I agree with my colleagues here. I am a little concerned that one project on Coast Village Road is going to turn into the entire median. on Coast Village Road. So we need a happy medium there on the median, a median. And I appreciate the applicant being willing to work with the business association and everyone involved in mitigating the removal of these 2 trees. But having 1 tree in the median does not necessarily a plan make, right? So I guess if there's a process involved that can make that happen without unduly burdening the process of moving forward with this particular project, I'm fine with that. So however anyone wants to put a motion together to that effect, I'd be happy to hear it. Mr. Hart, your light's on.
Well, I don't have a path clearly in my mind. I think I have some goals, and that is, yes, let's not burden this applicant with a long process. That's not their job to redesign Coast Village Road median planting. But we have an applicant who's doing something that does have an impact, so there's an opportunity, and they're willing to mitigate that, and they're willing to pay for, large box skyline trees to be planted. And so I think there's got to be a way we can figure this out to meet all of the goals that everybody's in mind, and I need some direction from staff as to give us a way to get there.
Ms. Zachary?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hart, and council members, a couple of things to consider. There are about 5 blocks on Coast Village Road, so if we were to undertake looking at the designation for all of those medians, that could take some time. Our urban forest management plan does call for us to do that in our major commercial corridors as a work effort. That alone, we could recommend that we move forward with just looking at this 1 median. We would refer it back to the Street Tree Advisory Committee. Those are public meetings. We would do site visits and then go to the Parks and Recreation Commission for a new designation, which would allow at least this median to move forward. And any discussion that we had would obviously be taken into context of the whole length of Coast Village Road. If we were to designate every single median, that would be a longer process than a couple of months. Usually it takes a little bit of time.
Okay, so I'm not looking for the whole street. I'm thinking a block. In fact, if you put the picture up, I think it really helps clarify what we're talking about.
It was the, I think it was the appellant's, that one.
There you go.
There you go.
That's the median I'm talking about. I think that's the most immediate. And it looks as though there's already median street trees in the other median immediately south of this. North, excuse me, probably actually west. But
right.
in our terms, toward the city of Santa Barbara. So I'm really looking at much more truncated situation. For example, if Santa Barbara Beautiful had money to go out and plant some street trees in this median, and they were offering to do that, I don't think we would be looking at this kind of a process. They'd just buy the street trees that are designated and plant them. So I'm thinking in those kinds of terms. So that's what I'd look for, is some path. As long as there's not significant opposition and objections from the neighbors, and this doesn't create yet another problem, but I hope it wouldn't, because it seems as though eucalyptus trees or sycamore trees, like are in the rest of the place, in those empty spots there. I don't know how long that continues this direction, but something like that would go a long way to mitigating this project and make a big improvement in the neighborhood.
Mr. Kalan had his...
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. As Member Tim Hart mentioned, there is both the type and burden nexus here. This replacing a tree for a tree is the same type of impact, and depending how many trees you want in exchange, there may be a reasonable nexus for doing that. The simplest way for the council to get there today would be to specify either a dollar figure, if staff can provide that, for the value of the tree or the number of trees that you want in the median. Allow those to be planted at a later date when the comprehensive planning is done. But you do need to reduce it to some quantifiable element today so that we can tie it into the conditions. The alternative would be to direct us to come back with findings, and during that process, staff could consult with the applicant to make a recommendation on a reasonable imposition.
Madam Mayor?
Yes,
I would agree with that. I would think something like 2 box trees, 2 skyline-type box trees, but also refer it back to the Street Tree Advisory Committee so you have a little public process to make sure we're not missing some dialogue or conversation that's been going on outside of this room that we're not aware of.
All right, well, I think that meets my goals. I think that having it come back as part of the conditions so that we have enough time to clarify precisely the number of spots, the number of trees, the price tag, and then hopefully we can make that part of the conditions of approval and have another process to install them. Mr. Casey, sounds like you have a different idea.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I'm thinking you could do it today. I'm not sure we want to delay this applicant's process and timeline to be able to move forward with the project. I think if you want to designate 2 skyline box trees in this median, refer to the Street Tree Advisory Committee and Parks Recreation Commission to confirm the appropriate location and placement of them. I think we can take care of this today. And type, absolutely.
Mr. Hart?
Yeah, I guess that works. I don't know how many empties. Yes, in fact, that's a motion. I'll make the motion that Mr. Casey made, suggested.
So the motion is to deny the appeal with the additional conditions of adding 2 box trees into the median, which is adjacent to the property. We don't have, and to refer the details of that mitigation to the Street Tree Advisory Committee at a future public hearing. Is that, and you need to know something a little more detailed than that?
I think the applicant would like to know whether you want 24-inch or 36-inch box trees.
Pick a number, Mr. Hart.
This is why I want this to come back, is I want there to be more time to figure out how much this is going to cost, how big a box is, what's the right thing to do. And I think the applicant is willing to wait for 2 weeks for us to come back, or however long it takes, not 2 weeks, thank you, for these conditions, because these things are a little bit more precise than I could do right here from the dais. So I don't know that 2 is the magic number, or 3, or 4, or 36-inch box, or 24-inch box, but this needs just a little bit more time and discussion with the applicant and staff.
And I think 2 weeks is fine. I thought you wanted us to go to the Street Tree Advisory Committee and work it all out.
I don't think we need to do
correct.
Have
but
a
I
meeting
think that's
in 2
fine.
weeks, so it would be 3 weeks, I would think.
3 weeks would have to be November 10th.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, we can do that, and I do urge that we get the specifics for the condition of approval. So
Yes, I think that's the intent, is to work with staff and the applicant to come up with a certain number of trees at a certain box and have that be part of the conditions of approval when you bring this back for our final action.
And to reiterate, for our drafting of the resolution approving removal of the trees, I'm hearing that the council finds that the safety of the persons or property dictates removal, and that reasonable development of the property also requires removal. So we'll include those 2 findings.
Right, so if I have to amend my original motion to be more precise and definitive and go this path, I would make that motion. I hope it's acceptable to the seconder. Okay.
And do we know what that motion is to the clerk? Okay, the clerk
All
does
right,
not
let's
know,
try
so
it
go
again.
ahead.
So we're going to deny the appeal and approve the application, making the findings as described by in the staff report, and have, as part of the revisions to the condition of approval, an additional condition requiring financial contribution from the applicant toward the purchase of skyline box trees to be specified with staff in a subsequent conversation, negotiation over the next few weeks.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Mr. White.
I would ask that the applicant install those 2 trees rather than they be a financial contribution. They install the 2 trees.
That's a better improvement on the motion.
Are you seconding that?
I guess I had seconded it before, and I continue to second it with that correction.
Clerk has that now, so you're good? All right. Okay. I liked how you said truncated for the tree. Any other questions on the motion? Mr. Kalana, are you satisfied with, has everything that you think we need for this motion?
I think we'll be back November 10th with action for you.
All right. Any other comments? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very much. We have a 4 o'clock item about interviews. Can we do the drought update in the 12 minutes? Or do we want to take a break until 4? I think we should go ahead. All right. I think we all know we're in a drought. So we're going to move on then to item number 7.
Stage 3 drought update.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the council. My name is Kelly Dyer. I'm the water supply manager, and I will be giving a quick update on our stage 3 drought. First, we'll go over the weather forecast, then review community conservation and water demands, review our water supply strategy, Lake Cachuma operations, a few capital projects, and our water conservation program. So the National Weather Service provides a 3-month look ahead for our weather. This is a chart of our projected precipitation over the next few months, and in our area they're showing equal chances of above normal, normal or below average rainfall. One of the things with a strong El Nino that we've heard is that in Southern California it historically has shown greater than or above normal rainfall for Southern California. It's sort of a mixed bag for Northern California. This shows our projected temperatures over the next 3 months, and they are projected to be warmer than normal. This is a picture of El Nino. On the left-hand side shows the strongest El Nino on record, which was in 1997. On the right-hand side shows our current El Nino, and so the El Nino is really this warmer ocean temperatures across the equator. What's different this time around is we've got warmer ocean temperatures off of North America, and this is what is known as the blob. Since we have never observed this condition, nobody really knows what that's going to mean. So right now there's a lot of media attention on this where it's called Godzilla versus the blob. Godzilla being El Nino and the blob being that northern warm ocean temperatures, and we're not really sure what that's going to mean. So for community conservation, this chart shows a summary of our conservation savings for the last water year. The left-hand side shows the drought target, which was 25% conservation. The state target was 12% conservation for our community, and that's because our water demands were already pretty, we were using water efficiently going into the drought, so we had a lower target than some other areas of the state. And then the right side of the chart shows our actuals, and we've exceeded our goals, both the city goals as well as the state goals, and we're really proud of that. This is the monthly demands over the last year. The red line shows our actuals. The blue line is our target, so we've gone beyond our target, particularly in the last few months over the summer. We've had a 33% reduction in water demands for September and have had 36% cumulative savings since the Stage 3 drought declaration. So we have now entered into the next water year, which began October 1st. We're now in year 5 in our drought. And the big differences between this year and last year, we are now using our Cachuma carryover, which is the blue bar here. We did not receive any allocation from Cachuma this year, so all that is remaining is what we had in storage from previous year's allocations. We are working on a couple of groundwater projects to increase our groundwater supply compared to last year. And then we're also relying on water purchases. These have already been secured and are in San Luis. We also have our recycled water plant coming online this fall. In terms of how this will be used on a monthly basis, right now our Cachuma water supply is subject to evaporation, any carryover subject to evaporation. So we're trying to use this first before we lose it, and then bring down our water purchases in the coming months. Probably December, January timeframe is when we'll start sending that water after we've used more of our Cachuma water. So Lake Cachuma operations, this is a chart showing our current storage versus the last drought in the late 80s and early 90s. So the green line is the 86 to 93 period, and we are currently right here in the current droughts. Our storage is about 32,000 acre feet in Cachuma. A big difference this time around is that we now have state water, which is conveyed through Kachuma. And also this time around, we have a biological opinion. In the last drought, we did not have fish releases, according to a biological opinion. So those are the two big differences, but our storage is tracking very closely to what it did last time. This year, we are possibly approaching lake levels we've never seen before, however. So this is uncharted territory once the lake levels drop below this point. Our current capacity is 32,000 acre feet. That's about 16.7% of capacity. For the city, we are assuming we'll have about 3,200 acre feet that we'll use this year. That's assuming a 20% evaporation loss from what we have in the water accounting. I will say one of the issues that we're facing with Kachuma is that the physical evaporation is greater than what's actually accounted for. So our water accounting at Combe is only about 30% of the total evaporation that actually occurs at the reservoir. This hasn't been an issue historically because whenever we had a 25,000 acre foot allocation from Kachuma, there was additional water in the reservoir that could evaporate. And we're approaching a point now where we're all bean counting. Whatever is left in the reservoir is already accounted for. It belongs to somebody, whether it's downstream water rights or the Kachuma member units or it's the minimum pool. And there isn't an accounting mechanism that will account for 100% of the evaporation. All of the accounting mechanisms are only about 30%. And so we're not really sure where that other physical evaporation is going to come from. And that's the Bureau's decision on whose water will be reduced due to that other 70% of evaporation. The emergency pump project is now in operation. We are evaluating when we might need to relocate the project to deeper levels of the lake. The current projections are that it would need to be relocated by June next summer, and that would be about $750,000 capital costs that would be shared among the member units that use the facility. Downstream water rights occurred in August and September. Those are now complete. That was over 10,000 acre feet that were released from the reservoir. Our fish water releases, the Bureau has a proposed action on how to reduce the fish releases that was submitted to NIMFS several months ago. We have not heard any approval on that, so there has been no change in the fish releases. And every month, the Kachuma member units staff get together and talk about our projected monthly deliveries from Kachuma now that we're down to the very last drops. We want to really see how agencies are planning to use Kachuma water and what the rest of their supply mix looks like so that we can see any issues coming before they actually occur. Drought response capital projects. Our recycled water facility is just about complete. We expect it to be online and producing water the end of this month and going into the system early November. We'll be doing some public outreach to our recycled water customers. And we've been working hard on the IRWIM grant, which was over $1 million in funding for that project. We have 2 groundwater projects that we're currently working on. High School Well, expected to be complete by summer of 2016, and Hope Well cleaning expected to be complete by spring of 2016. I'm kind of breezing through this, so if you have any questions, let me know. And our desal project status in notice to proceed was issued in August. Site demo began in September, and we're working on procurement of long lead time items. And water is projected to be in the system September 2016 with final contract completion following shortly after. And now I will turn it over to our acting water conservation coordinator, Madeline Ward.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I just have a few slides to share with you of some of our indoor water conservation devices. We do have a free showerhead program that we are running in conjunction with the county. In the city, these are available at the 630 Garden Street location at the Public Works counter. This is a 1.5 gallon per minute showerhead, and it is WaterSense certified. And if you're not familiar with WaterSense, it's an EPA certification program similar to Energy Star. This is an exchange program, so customers do need to bring in an old showerhead to receive a new one. We don't have a cap on the amount of showerheads anyone can receive, but you do need to bring in an equal amount of the old showerheads. To date, we've distributed about 80 at our own counter and about 570 countywide. Also, what Mr. Casey is distributing to you are aerators and dye tablets, and I'll give a quick rundown on those. These are bathroom faucet aerators. They're rated at 1.0 gallons per minute. Most of you probably have an aerator existing on your bathroom. You can simply unscrew the old one. These can be male or female threaded. There's 2 washers in there, and you simply screw the new one back on. Also, you have toilet tank leak detecting dye tablet packets, and these are also available in the back of the room where people pick up their speaker slips. We have dye tablets and aerators for anyone else to take here in the room, and I'll explain how to use the dye tablets. So there's 2 main ways that toilets tend to leak here in the city and nationwide, and we do estimate that about 20% of all toilets are currently leaking, and generally it's very silent. So one of the best ways to test is to actually dye the water. I'm going to use this little. Okay. So what you do with your dye tablets is you just need 1 per toilet. You open up the tank, drop 1 in the water, and it will dye this water blue. It's important to let everyone know in your household that you're doing a science experiment so they don't flush the toilet and ruin the experiment. You need to wait about 10 or 15 minutes and then check the color in the bowl. If there's blue in the bowl, that means it is snuck from the tank into the bowl without you telling it to. The way you tell the water to go in is obviously by flushing. So this is a silent leak. This is really the best way to tell if this is happening. And what's happening is that this red flapper, this rubber flapper, they're usually black or blue or red. That means it's leaking. It could either have something stuck in it or it might just be warped with age. So it's best to replace that with the exact make and model of your toilet and then test it again to make sure it's fixed. While you're back in the tank looking at the water level and putting in the tablets, it's also good to check the overflow tube. So that's this little tube here and here. You want to check the water level in the back of the tank to make sure it's a full inch below that tube. Because at night when the water pressure rises, the pressure in the tank will rise and it'll cause the water to spill over while you're sleeping, and you won't know that it's actually running down the tube and straight into the sewer. There's many ways to adjust these down. I recommend that you type in the make and model of your toilet and look at a YouTube video, and it'll explain how to reduce the water level in the back of your tank. So again, those are available in the back of the room, as well as a flyer that explains how to check for all these leaks in the toilets.
Wow.
And we're available for any questions.
All right, thank you. Let's. We have 1 public comment speaker slip, and then we'll go back to questions. Phil Walker. Is Phil still here? He took off? Okay, take off. Okay, Mr. Hart, did you have... Go ahead.
Thank you for the stuff. This is great. I was meaning to do this, so this has short-circuited my list. Is there potential for the purchased water and the that's up in San Luis Reservoir getting stuck in the lake if the level drops to the point where we can't move the pump?
I have not heard. I did ask at CCWA the last time I was there whether there is a concern in actually being able to get water out of San Luis over to Lake Cachuma. That is not a concern as far as we know from CCWA. Where we have our delivery concerns is once it gets to Cachuma, being able to pump it out of the lake to the south coast.
So that still is a problem. We do not have unanimity on the COMB board about potentially moving the pump to a lower elevation in the lake?
It hasn't been authorized yet.
Okay, so the real catastrophic circumstances would be that agreement doesn't occur and we're not able to get this purchased water that's up in San Luis Reservoir, or even that it gets sent to Cachuma and evaporates before we're able to access it.
That would be a concern, and we might want to consider other avenues of completing the project because it's such a critical facility for the South Coast.
So are there other ways to do that without unanimous consent?
There may be a possible other funding mechanisms.
Did you
Looks
want
like
to add something to that, Mr.
Councilman White.
Well, just that is absolutely a topic of conversation at COMB, and Mr. Francisco may be able to chime in here as well, but that I speak personally to say that it would seem possible that funds could come not from COMB to make that happen. And obviously, in a desperate situation, that would be the funding would occur, would come from somewhere. But
So
that's the veto, the power that you're talking about is that $1 million, any $1 million expenditure at COMB needs a unanimous vote. And the total cost, again, and there's dispute about what constitutes total cost, but the total cost of moving the barge can be alleged to be $1 million, or it could be, as our staff has pointed out, as little as $750,000.
I see. So it's not a bureau issue. It's not a federal permission issue. It's just a money issue for COMB.
And it's a inter-agency issue.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And not involving the bureau. Correct.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, great. Well, you had a great audience to get your devices in the back of the room, your dye tablets and all that. Thank you very much. Move on to item number 8.
Interviews for city advisory groups.
Okay, so see a number of applicants in the room. Want to thank you very much for applying to be on one of our boards and commissions. And if you are currently serving, thank you for your service. What we're going to do here is just basically go through the committees by name. And if you are applying to that committee, just come on up to the podium here and state your name. And if you are applying to more than one board or commission, you can do both of those at the same time. Just tell us which ones they are. And if you're doing more than one, I think we have preference 1 and 2 in our notes, but you're welcome to let us know what your preferences are. This is our first of 3 interview processes, so we'll be doing this 2 more times after today, and then our appointments will be made in either late November or early December, probably early December. So with that, I'm just going to go in alphabetical order. And so if you hear the committee of which you are applying, just come on up. We'll start with the Access Advisory Committee. Anyone from there? Okay. And then to the Architectural Board of Review. All right. The Arts Advisory Committee. Come on up. Good afternoon.
Hello. Hi, I'm Joan Rosenberg Dent, and I'm here to apply for the Arts Advisory Group's position. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I've been a teacher, an administrator, a full-time artist, and a parent. As a teacher, I taught ballet when I was in high school and college. And then I finally got a degree and I taught elementary education. Then I went back to school and got a couple more degrees and taught on the college level. I taught at several universities, the University of Michigan, Penn State University, and Ohio University, where I chaired the Department of Ceramics and Glass. And from teaching at the university, or teaching all my life, I gained some wonderful skills in communication, in negotiation, in dealing with people of different ages and different ability levels, and I was very open to new ideas that opened me up. As an administrator, I started an organization in Philadelphia called the Artist Cultural Exchange, ACX, and we had about 300 members when I left 16 years ago. And it was an organization that was inclusive rather than exclusive. So artists from all different media could join at all different levels of ability, and the shows were then juried. And then I started, along with my friend Nancy Gifford, sitting here, WOCA, which is a current group now in Santa Barbara called the Women of Contemporary Art. And it's a group that is a very high-powered group in that we have some of your art commissioners in the group. We have people from the Museum of Art, the curators. We have from the different universities, professors in our group. We have art collectors, poets. It's a group of people in Santa Barbara who are extremely involved and serious about art. I'm also on the Dean's Advisory Committee for the University of Michigan Stamp School of Art and Design. I've been on that for about 5 years, and I work very closely with the dean there. And as an artist, I'm a full-time studio artist. I'm in my studio 5 days a week. I actively show nationally and internationally. I have pieces in the Detroit Institute of Art's permanent collection, University of Michigan permanent collection, one piece at the Renwick, which is part of the Smithsonian, and there's a list. You can look at my website if you're interested. Why do I wish to be on this committee? First of all, my passion is really about art. It's about both visual art and performance art. Secondly, when I moved to Santa Barbara, I found the arts community so supportive. I've never lived anywhere else that has been so supportive. And I just feel that at this point in my life, I'm ready to give back. And if I don't do it now, when? So that's why. And my third reason is my wish is to see Santa Barbara back on the map as an arts destination and an arts community.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Thank you. Anyone else for the Arts Advisory Committee? Come on up.
Hello, I'm Margie Ayavi. I'm the Executive Director for Santa Barbara Education Foundation. And you guys appointed me to this committee about a year ago to replace somebody who had left midterm. So I've had the opportunity to serve on the committee for about 10 months, started in January. And I'd like the opportunity to continue. I feel like I'm getting the pace and getting to know everyone and getting to understand what the committee is really doing. And it's a fun committee. And I enjoy the work that the committee does for the city. So all of my qualifications and all of that is the same as it was before. I work for Santa Barbara Education Foundation. We're a liaison for the city and for to K-12 education. Santa Barbara Education Foundation raises money for music and arts in the schools, among other issues, but we do feel really strongly about the importance of keeping art and music in the curriculum in the school district. Anything that's new since I last was before you guys is that we've been working with the district to get a VAPA coordinator, so we have now started in September, a visual and performing arts coordinator hired in the district to work with all the schools to ensure a well-rounded curriculum with access for all the kids, sort of equalize the arts that are offered in all the schools. And so that's a new thing. The Santa Barbara Alliance for Arts Education is a new committee, a new group. It's been sort of in the forming for about a year and a half, but it's really getting its feet wet now and coming together as an organization. And the third thing is that we're working, Santa Barbara Education Foundation is working with Sarah Miller McCune to create a new fund called the Lenny Faye Blonde Performing Arts Fund, and that's really Sarah is the driving force behind that fund, and she really wants to do something in memory of her dear friend Lenny Faye Blonde. So the purpose of that is to bring children, have more exposure for children to see the performing arts. Other than that, we just finished another successful Pianos on State. I think it might have been the best yet. It was really fun going down State Street and hearing everyone play. That's a great example of the sort of collaborative nature of my position, working with other nonprofit organizations and other organizations in the city to pull off some kind of fun artsy projects and bring art to the schools and bring art to the community. So do you guys have any questions for me?
Any questions? Nope. Thank you very much.
Thank
you for your service so far.
Thank you.
My name's Nancy Gifford. I'm not sure if I qualify. They did say there was one opening for people that don't live actually in Santa Barbara City. I live in Montecito. But I see Joan's here, and I think she's very qualified, so I'm happy if Joan gets the spot. I moved here 7 years ago, and I got very involved in the arts community quite quickly. I've been on the board of the Arts Fund for 7 years. And I've also been on the board of the Museum of Contemporary Art for 7 years. So I kind of jumped in when I got here, not knowing what I was doing. But I just fell in love with all the artists in the community, the people here that are involved in the arts. And I try to bridge a lot of different organizations. I'm also on the Arts Council for Westmont Museum. And so I like being involved in different kinds of organizations, but my heart was really with the Arts Fund and building up what we've done in the Funkstone. And I spearheaded the Funkstone Art Walks there and trying to build up what's going on there. But very grassroots, more of a grassroots kind of person. I don't have administrative... So I don't really know what this council does, but so I'm just trying to get some information today, too. But I know some people have sat on it, and Doug Uyasaka and friends of mine that I have a lot of respect for. So, and I also know Ginny Brush, who I've had a lot of respect for her. Sorry to say she's leaving. And I don't know if you have any questions. And like Joan said, we started WOCA about 5 years ago, and we love our women. It's Women of Contemporary. we try to support each other and help each other. So,
thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Okay.
Anyone else for the Arts Advisory Committee? Okay. Civil Service Commission.
Madam Mayor and members of your City Council, my name is Donna Lewis, and I'd like to continue on the Civil Service Commission. I have, answering the questions in order, I've demonstrated willingness and ability to devote the time that's necessary to the Civil Service Commission, and my fellow commissioners have twice voted me chair. The City Civil Service Commission enforces the merit-based system that's designed by state law for public employment. The experiences and skills that are essential are the ability to engage in bias-free analysis, which is easier said than done. In my primarily employment law practice, I've represented both employers and employees. And the Civil Service Commission has, in the last few years, revised its hearing procedures, which makes them far more clear and useful. I'd like to be reappointed because I believe that the Commission is a force for good. It applies basic rules of fairness, that the framers built into the Bill of Rights. The fifth question is there anything I'm desirous of promoting or changing? And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank this council for two things. One is for hiring the new city attorney. He is absolutely fabulous, and it makes a huge difference in our ability, for example, to revise the hearing procedures, which this council approved earlier this year. One of the question 6 is what was the most significant or rewarding experience during my tenure? I would say that was getting the conflict of interest elements built into the written rules that govern our commission. And is the city advisory group operating as well as it could? Short answer to that is it is now. Thank you very much. If anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, and thank you for your service. Any questions? No. Thank you very much. Mr. K-Season, come on up.
I need the tall mic. Hi, I'm Alan K-Sagan. I'm finishing my third term as a Civil Service Commissioner, and I've had such a good time, I want to do it some more. I'm a dinosaur in that I spent my entire professional career with the County of Santa Barbara. I'm here 36 and a half years. I worked 6.5 years in the Central Personnel Department and then 30 years in the Public Health Department, most of that time as their Human Resources Manager. As such, I've had the opportunity to be on the departmental side in a civil service system, guiding managers, supervisors, department heads in the process of preparing discipline issues for employees. And one of my guiding principles was try to be fair. Don't let anybody get railroaded. Make sure you've done your homework, because this is a real serious thing. And as a Civil Service Commissioner, I appreciate what has to go into a disciplinary action if it's forthcoming. And my job is to be as fair and bias-free as possible. But I think I have some background that helps me assess how to get there. I have the time, I'm retired. One of the things that I want to add to what Donna said about the new procedures is that all commissioners were engaged and participated. Nobody dragged their feet, everybody had good ideas. And it took us a while, the stakeholders were involved, the union was involved, the meet and confer process was involved, and the end product, I think, is better for what is a very complex process. And so somebody just entering it should be able to read those and make sense of it, where before it was somewhat hit or miss. And so I'm very proud to be part of that. And I too think the commission is great. It's interested, it's engaged, and you have a good depth of HR knowledge. So I'm hoping to be able to do it some more. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your service. Any questions? No. No. Go ahead. Community Development and Human Services.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. My name is Veronica Loza.
Move your mic down a little bit there.
Oh,
There
I'm
you
short,
go.
even with heels on.
He was tall.
My name is Veronica Loza, and I come before you today to request reappointment to the Community Development and Human Services Committee as a representative of the East Side community. I have served on the committee for several years, actually since 2007. During my service with CDH-SC, I have learned a great deal about our vast nonprofit community, as well as seen many of the positive capital improvements to the East Side community and the city itself. This all being accomplished with assistance through the City Human Services Funding and CDBG grants. I have thoroughly enjoyed working with this committee and feel that my work and input on CDH-SC committee is not done yet. I look forward to your approval of my reappointment and further working with the Community Development and Human Services Committee in assessing our community needs, goals, and priorities.
Great.
Thank you for your time and
Thank you,
consideration.
and thank you for all your service. We approved your process for next year, so there we go.
I heard. Thank you.
Earlier today. Anyone else for the community development? And come on over. Great. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Nicolas Crisosto, and I am applying as a representative of the East Side. I'm relatively new to the East Side. We decided to finally purchase a home here in Santa Barbara. We've been working on and off in Santa Barbara for over 14 years at Santa Barbara City College and in other areas. My experience is with nonprofits and education. I have a background in math as an instructor and a computer literacy lecturer. And most recently, I've been working with nonprofits here in Santa Barbara and in the Tri-County area. I was working with an organization that specifically provides resources and information to individuals with disabilities and to seniors throughout the Tri-County area. Through that work, I became very familiar with a lot of the network of benefits and opportunities there are for Santa Barbara residents to take advantage of resources here in Santa Barbara that can really address some of their needs. I'm very familiar with community organizing practices and outreach. One of the questions that we were asked to address is ideas to help with outreach strategies. And what I have not seen in the East Side is just a simple tabling type process where committee members or staff could be not in front of Trader Joe's per se, but maybe at a table for a few hours in the neighborhood by the small markets. That's where a lot of the pulse of the neighborhood passes by, and to really find out what the community members are facing as problems or challenges and the solutions that they're trying to enact on their own, I think that would be a really good conduit of information. I have experience reviewing reports and statistics and analyzing a number of different types of questions that I think would be really valuable to city staff and to the city council. And lastly, I'd like to reiterate that I am a resident of the East Side, a new homeowner there, and I have a lot of pride in what we're trying to accomplish. I've been learning a lot from the discussions about the new city council process for elections, and I look forward to the outcomes. Thank you.
And you're also applying for Neighborhood Advisory Committee and the Rental Housing Mediation
Yes, I am.
Board.
Would you like me to come back up? Or?
No, you can do all of them right
excellent.
now. So just
Okay.
anything in addition to those in terms of your priority options.
Well, specifically, the other thing I wanted to mention is I do have experience working on advisory committees, not in Santa Barbara, but in Ventura County. I was appointed as a member of the In-Home Support Services Advisory Committee, and I was elected chair of that group for 2 years. So we created bilingual outreach strategies to work with some of the most disenfranchised individuals in the community, individuals with disabilities or severe medical conditions and very low income. So I've worked with agencies on that level as well. My interest also in the Neighborhood Advisory Council is to bring more grassroots perspective and usable information, usable references from the community members. Issues that I have kind of wanted to bring up are, from talking to residents, noise, for example, parking, and then something as simple as how do we work proactively and to the benefit of the entire community to address being able to have passable sidewalks where we don't really want to punish people who may have their hedges growing out, or when we all had this great summer and the plants were blooming, and suddenly it could be an individual with a disability, or it could be a mother with her child in the stroller, but the plants are now blocking the sidewalk. And how do we start addressing those things? Because residents seem to be having struggles with that. So those are the type of issues that I could really help illuminate with the Neighborhood Advisory Council Commission. And then in terms of the Rental Mediation Board, I've experienced working as an advocate for individuals from low-income socioeconomic backgrounds, working with people to help resolve issues so that it's going to be a win-win-win for everyone involved. And I think that I would be a very good representative on either of the commissions wherever you might need service. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And actually, to the clerk, I don't know if Ms. Losa working at the Housing Authority counts under a human services agency or not. So if we could look into that, because there's a vacancy there as well in terms of determination, that would be helpful. Okay. Anyone else for community development? All right. Community events and festivals. Come on up. Good afternoon.
Mayor and council members. Hello, is that Debbie? Oh,
That's Susan. Debbie's in the other room with the mayor and council
sorry.
office.
My name is Doreen Stevenson. I work for NewsHawk. I'm proud to say, and I want to let you know that I applied for this position because I've served in over 20 different organizations that I volunteered for. Currently, right now, I am working with the visiting nurses and hospice in a volunteer capacity. And then I serve almost weekly at the Santa Barbara Rescue Mission. And then when it comes to events, I serve at the Solstice. And being with NewsHawk, we're really involved in quite a few organizations. I'm very active in both of the Goleta and Santa Barbara chambers as well. I've chaired some golf tournaments. I'm an avid golfer. I know we want to bring some green fees and some more activity to the golf course. I chaired a golf tournament with the Santa Barbara, San Fernando Valley Board of Realtors where I lived, and was very successful. I served on this Encino Chamber of Commerce for 3 years as a board of directors. I got Member of the Year there, and to name a few. And currently, right now, I'm pretty active now. I'm starting to get more involved with the arts and with the symphony and the Granada. And I love Santa Barbara. It's just a place that I desired to come 6 years ago. I was at school here in 86 and 87 at City College. And I'm currently actually enrolled in a class there as well. So I'm open for any questions.
Great. Thank you. Any questions? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Come on up.
Hi, my name is Brad Knack, and I was appointed to this committee last year to fill out a term of somebody who vacated it, and I had a lot of fun. It was my first appointment to any committee or any civic-minded thing ever, unlike our friend here, who's done a lot of things. I haven't done hardly any of that, so I came with kind of a fresh perspective, but I really liked it, and I was happy to be part of it, and since then I became executive director at the Arts Fund, which I think resulted in part from being on that committee, and so I've appreciated the opportunity, and I'd like to continue.
Thank you for your service. When's your reindeer?
December 3rd.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right. If you don't know about
Good
it,
question.
ask him. Okay,
Yeah.
December 3rd. All right.
Okay.
Any questions?
Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else for community events and festivals? Okay. Creeks Advisory. Downtown Parking. Fire and Police Commission. Melody, go ahead. We'll let Melody go, and then you can go next, John.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name's Melody Baker. The reason that I am asked to be on this one in the way I feel qualified, I have had many interactions with the police and the fire department. We have started working some misunderstandings out. We're starting to be more cohesive about how to handle things and whatnot. And actually, one of the main reasons police and fire knocked me down, I bounced back with a vengeance. And that's what I do. I bounce back and get things completed with a vengeance. You start me on something, I actually have a resume from Path Point. You know who they are, from Jaime Rudiga, and it was actually a letter of recommendation because I applied for a position at a church. And he stated Ms. Baker's very organized. She is time efficient. She will streamline and find inefficiencies and correct them. And she will complete projects ahead of time. And that's what I do. He also said, you can show Ms. Baker a task that you want her to do, have her show her once, and leave. You don't have to supervise her. And would I be willing to attend the police class? Sure, I would love to. But it's not, I'm never told when it's held. I think it's a great way, and I think all public should attend it. But by being on this commission or a committee, from what I understand, it would be helping to bridge the gap between public and police and fire relations. Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions? No. Thank you very much. Mr. Terrell?
Hello, everyone. My name is John Terrell. I'm currently a member of the commission, and I'm just finishing my first term. And it's been a really positive experience, and I think we've accomplished a few things, so I'd like you would appoint me for one more term. A little bit about me, I'll keep this brief. I'm retired from the county. I had about a 25-year career in the private sector, came to the county in 1990, so I've been living in the city here since 1990. Retired from the county about 4 years ago as a director of housing and community development. Prior to that, I was the auditor controller for the city of San Diego, and prior to that, I was the assistant auditor controller working for Bob Geis, who's still the county auditor. So I know quite a bit about the city and how things work. One of my singular accomplishment, my big accomplishment, I guess, this past term on the commission was that I initiated a project and led a project team to revise the county's tow regulations for all the tow operators. The city had a long book of regulations, as did the county, as did the California Highway Patrol, and we figured, why should these guys have to follow 3 different sets of rules? So we tried to bring them as close together as we could, and I think we made it a better document as a result. So we've got 5 really good people on the commission now, so I think hopefully we can provide a decent service for the council. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, and thank you for your service. Ms. Christensen?
Good afternoon, Mayor, council members. I'm Jennifer Christensen. I'm the County Investment Officer, and I'm also the chair of the Fire and Police Commission. I'm finishing my second term. It has been a very enjoyable and educational experience. I've gotten to know a lot about the fire and police department operations, and I actually joined John Terrell on that subcommittee, pulling together the tow regulations for the operators that are on file with the departments. And actually, it was a very collaborative experience with the operators. They had some ideas about how to improve those regs and really get everything in line with the state requirements. So there's now a fairly consistent program across the 3 agencies, the Sheriff's Department, the city, and CHP. The other thing that I actually contributed this last term was it was at the suggestion of Jim Armstrong. It was an excellent suggestion. It was a calendar for our commission so that we could have sort of a regularly planned items throughout the year to kind of keep things moving and set expectations for the departments. And I think they've actually really appreciated that. I would be honored and happy to serve for another term. And if there are any questions I could answer for you, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Any questions? Nope. Great. Thank you very much. Okay, Fire and Police Pension Commission. Harbor Commission, come on up.
Hello, Mayor and Council. My name is Stephen McIntosh. I'm a financial advisor at Kroll, Wheaton, D.A. Davidson. where I lead the company's efforts in socially responsible investing for individuals and families and foundations. I've had the pleasure of serving on the Harbor Commission since the summer of 2014. And in that time, I've served on the Commission's Budget Committee, the Commission's Budget, and the Local Coastal Plan Update Committee. Having worked in the public sector, as many of you know, and the private sector, and as a volunteer on several nonprofit boards and government commissions, I hope that my perspective and contributions have provided some value to the Commission. From my time as a government employee, I understand staff's challenges and what it takes for them to get the job done. As an executive running a couple of service-oriented business units for a Fortune 300, and now in my role as a financial services provider, I have a keen eye on customer service and customer experience. And I focus on how our commercial partners or lessees and slip holders and visitors experience the harbor. I've thoroughly enjoyed working with the waterfront staff and my fellow harbor commissioners. It's an efficient and well-run enterprise and one of the true gems of our city. I'd be honored to be considered by your council to serve another term. Thank you.
Thank you for your service. Any questions? No. Anyone else? Harbor? Okay, historic landmarks. Come on up. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Michael Drury. I currently serve on the Historic Landmarks Commission, and I can thank Dale Francisco for appointing me or having me even consider serving the city. And I'd like another opportunity for another go-around. And I'm born and raised in Santa Barbara. I'm a landscape painter. And I bring, I think, a somewhat unique viewpoint to the Historic Landmarks Commission. And there were two questions that were sent to us, and one of them is, can I think of a better way to conduct the business at the Commission? I cannot. City staff is fantastic. We are always well armed with facts. And for me, it's since I love my city as I do, it's the opportunity to serve has been extraordinary and really enjoyable. And we have some, as you all know, some pretty big projects came in front of us over the last 3 years, and I'm proud of my part in it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your service. Any questions? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Historic landmarks. Okay. Yeah. Just what I thought. Come on up.
So my name is Anthony Grumbine. I've been before you last year for the Historic Landmarks Commission. So I think I guess the approach that I would take when looking at whether I would be a good member or not would be, first, do I have the capability in terms of the understanding and the knowledge base to contribute, and then how that is actually contributed and how that's provided to the public and to the applicant as they come before HLC. So on the understanding side of things, I have in terms of education, I've gone to Notre Dame, which specializes in classical architecture, and then from there I came to Santa Barbara for the last almost 9 years now. I've been working for Tony Spann and Barbara Lowenthal, and had the joy of being able to work on a number of, actually even most of our projects being historic projects, and really in that process, as one of my professors would say, my best teachers have been dead for hundreds of years. And when you work with a historic building, you really understand that. And you understand, and you start to think like they think and start realizing that they made a certain move in one corner, and then that resolved issues on the other corner. And you start to understand the way they think. So it's been a great joy for the last number of years working in Santa Barbara and sort of understanding the practical nuts and bolts of the city. I've also had the privilege to work with Jake Jacobus and Nicole Hernandez in working out, which is now, I believe, still in draft form, on the Santa Barbara Style Guide, and being able to do a lot of the drawings and text for that. And it's been a great sort of learning experience looking through the historian's eyes at the city piece by piece, and working with Jaime Limon, of course, as well. And then the final part of sort of been the life of study for architecture has been in doing writings or talks and walking tours and things like that, where in the preparation, the study for those pieces, I've been able to collect a lot of sort of information about all the different architecture styles of Santa Barbara, where those details come from, what the history was, what the society was at the time, why they made the moves they did, and sort of been able to appreciate more than just the actual forms, but actually the people that put those forms together. So that's been a sort of the collection of everything that I know and love Santa Barbara architecturally has come through those process. So the next question is how to get that out, or how to express that, and how to help convey that to other people, especially people who are practically speaking, trying to do something, usually with a decent-sized budget. This means a lot of money. This means time. This means a big, important thing. So on the practical side, I work for a Harrison Design architecture firm, so we deal with it from the clients and that side of things all the time, and what the desires and wishes are from the client perspective. And then, of course, there's a public aspect of it, and what you build as a city and what you put forward is not just a private thing. It's something that everyone else enjoys and uses as well. So part of this goal for me has been sort of satisfied in teaching at Santa Barbara City College the last couple of years now, teaching an architecture history and drawing course where you study and you understand the buildings through studying either everything from the detail to the overall big picture massing of, a pitch of a roof is a big thing. It may seem, small and mundane that it's 3 and 12, but 3 and 12 is different than 6 and 12 when you're in Santa Barbara, and you can see examples down, Orange County or things like that where they don't quite get it. And, a roof is a roof, a pitch is a pitch, and those details aren't thought of. So that's been a great joy as well. Been able to work with Coalition for Sustainable Transportation on their walking tours, a number of groups of realtors, and then as well the Santa Barbara Trust for Historic Preservation. So overall, in all, those have been the groups I've been involved with and the love I have for the city. And so I would be overjoyed and honored if you would consider me for a member to the HLC.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Nope. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. The city rep for the County of Santa Barbara Library Advisory Board. Or the library board? No. Living wage? No, there's none. Neighborhood Advisory Council. Keep on going. Parks and Recreation. Planning Commission. Getting through. Rental Housing Mediation Task Force. There we go.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and members of council. My name is Lynn Goebel. I am the current chair of the Rental Housing Mediation Board. And it's never a problem to go alphabetically through these boards and commissions because there's such a wealth of wonderful people in this community. I'm just enjoying hearing about everyone and the diverse group of people. I am a family law attorney, so it perhaps seems odd that I would advocate for mediation, but studies have shown that when you're all involved in the process and you have some stake in the process and an ability to reach an agreement, that really makes the deal better than having to go to court because the economic and even the emotional cost of litigation is exorbitant. And we mediate between landlord and tenant, roommates and roommates, and other situations like that. And I hope Ms. Murillo, as our liaison, has shared with you some of the statistics and the numbers of people and the areas in which we have served people. A lot of them Section 8 housing individuals, a lot of them without the means to, if they had to, hire an attorney. So it's been my honor to serve on this board. I would hope that you reappoint me. We're a collegial group, and it feels good to try and do good. When you do good, I think good follows.
And thank you for your service.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else for the Rental Housing Mediation Task Force? Okay. Youth Council, no. Single Family Design Review Board. Come on up.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. My name is Lisa James, and I am a landscape designer, and I've served as one of the design professionals on the Single Family Design Board for the last 3 years. And my term is about up, and I am coming to you to ask for another term because I absolutely love my appointment. It is not only an honor to serve with such prestige colleagues on the board, but to be a part of keeping the fabric of Santa Barbara intact. I'm just thrilled with my appointment, and I've learned so much about the building process in general. It's made me a much better landscape designer. I've also, since my last appointment, I've moved to the heart of downtown, right in the historic district, and I walk the neighborhood all the time, see what projects we're approving, and that's been another great benefit of the appointment, is driving around, seeing the noticed properties, and finding places in Santa Barbara where I've never been before. I pride myself in thinking that I know all the streets in Santa Barbara, as I administrated a city street tree planting program in 1983 through Dan Condon, and personally selected spaces for many of the street trees in this town 30 years ago. So I got to see a lot of streets then, and I just love seeing what we're doing here, and would hope that you would allow me another term so I continue to grow both as a landscape designer and as a servant of our city. Thank you for your time.
Thank you
Any
for your
questions?
service.
Thank you.
You've asked her what the tree was on Coast Village Road earlier today. You weren't here yet, but that's okay. We'll tell you later. Okay, Water Commission. Last but not least.
I'm Jim Davis, and Madam Mayor and council members, the note that I received was to spend 2 or 3 minutes and give you my qualifications for being on the Water Commission. So, and I think I might be a good fit, because I think water supply and maintenance of quality is an enduring problem in Southern California. It's going to continue almost no matter what we do, and so I think it's a lot of the problems are technical, and my background is technical. I have a bachelor's degree from Caltech in physics. I have a PhD from UCLA in physics. I worked in the aerospace industry for about 8 or 9 years. I worked at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory for 20 years. There I was, but 1/3 of it, I was in charge of a program dealing with detecting, producing, and managing special nuclear materials. Then I was in charge of for about another 6 years in environmental programs. And the main issue there was Lawrence Livermore Lab was originally a naval base, for pilots training prior to the Second World War and even during it. And they had dumped a lot of chemicals into the ground just as they washed the engines and stuff. So there was a big issue there of keeping that from getting into the water table. So I was involved in that for about 6 years. Then I became a co-director of the laboratory and had a large variety of programs reporting to me, all technical, highly technical programs. Then after that 20 years there, I went out into private industry, spent about 8 years as a private consultant. I worked for American International Technology for about 4 years, and we finally got that company sold to a Japanese company. And then I worked for Tetra Pak in Sweden for another 3 or 4 years. Again, very different types of technical problems. And relating to the city and county operations, I did serve 1 year on the civil grand jury. What else can I say about myself? I don't know. That's about it, I guess.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right. I think I got everyone in the room, right? So thank you. All right. So we will continue this on to the next round of interviews on October 27th. October 27th. Okay. That's it for this item. Any council member committee assignment reports? Ms. Murillo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We've been very busy on the West Side. The Bicycle Master Plan team came to the West Side Community Center last night. There was a good turnout. I wish there were more moms with kids. It seemed like there was a lot of recreational users and commuters. I was looking for some more family engagement. The West Side Community Group met. Yoli McGlinchey talked to us about preparing for El Nino storms. The Special Olympics had a fundraiser this weekend. Very nice. Thank you to SEIU, City Fire, and County Fire for cooking and serving. Very, very nice. And the Gang Task Force had a meeting last week. There was a couple of items. One was the disproportionate number of Latino and African American youth in the criminal justice system, and also a report on child sex trafficking, very serious. In terms of process, the Gang Task Force is looking at maybe changing its name or meeting less frequently. And so that I look forward to that unfolding. As I said earlier in the meeting, that we need to keep up our vigilance against gang activity. Thank you.
Mr. Rouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The proclamation you gave earlier was part of an art contest that I got to be a judge for at the county schools for the CADA kids from, I think it's K through 6. So a lot of talented artists out there and a very nice theme indeed.
I heard there were 2,200 applicants. I was there to give out the ribbons over the weekend, so kudos to you.
There were a few, yes. We probably judged in the neighborhood of about 120 pieces of art. So.
Yeah, pretty amazing. Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So one of my roles on COMB is to chair the Oak Tree Committee, which I thought was kind of like arranging deck chairs on the Titanic since they were talking about planting more trees. And indeed, it's a big project, which I had not been aware of, that is to offset the loss of trees that has occurred around the edge of the lake by being submerged and by the surge of the lake that has been created to raise the level of the lake to provide more water for fish habitat. So there's been an effort over the last 7 years to plant more trees, and I think I was frantically looking for the exact number, but it's something in the order of the total project is in the range of 3,000 trees. So it's a project of some size, and there are at this stage at least there's another large number of trees that are going to go into the ground even this next year. The seeds have been sprouted, and there's sort of this whole, as we know with larger projects, there's a lot of lead time to it, so they're going forward with it in any case. So that's another reason why we need this El Nino to come through, so we won't have to irrigate them so much. Also, I did attend the Neighborhood Advisory Council, which also heard the bicycle master plan presentation. It is one of those things where it's useful to hear it a few times. You do get more information, and the strategic element that plan is presenting, and I think that the folks in that council got to hear of winnowing down the project to specific blocks in order to connect established bike paths is a really cool thing. Third, I attended the SB-CAG meeting, and I would say there's some real progress being made there on this front. Every 7 years is a strategic plan update that's required by Measure A, and there's now in place at this meeting the board voted to keep basically the same strategic plan in place for 18 more months until we get a budget on a more accurate figure on what Highway 101 is going to cost. And as backup to that, there is, for the first time, I think, a tip of the hat to the concept of conceivably using some of these funds for streets pending the outcome of that budget in 18 months. So I think there's at least some progress towards looking at local streets a little more closely. I also attended the Air Pollution Control District meeting, which interviewed the finalists for the executive director job there. And finally, yesterday I attended the COMB meeting. There was a contentious issue that was discussed in closed session, the letter that was presented to COMB is public information, which is basically that the Santa Ynez Improvement District Number 1 is stating that it's choosing not to pay a portion of its cost of its assessment for participating in COMB. So it's a real head scratcher, and that did consume a good deal of time in closed session as well. So let's see, what else was there on there? Back at SBCAG, the staff did report that the California Transportation Commission did tip its hat to one of our city projects. That's the ATP money of which we got a goodly amount last year. This year, at least, that the commission is recommending for approval a project on Carpinteria and Voluntario that's in the amount of some $600,000. So that's one more bit of good work coming out of our staff.
Great, you've been busy.
Thank you.
And thank you for SBCAG and APCD. I was two things that day in Los Angeles area. One, the U.S. Conference of Mayors had their Water Council meeting, which they could have anywhere in the country, and they had it in Los Angeles. It was pretty appropriate to have a Water Council meeting in California. There were about 36 mayors from around the country there. I have a lot of information from that if you're interested in it. It's very technical, some of it, but also a lot of it has to do with national regulations and how it relates to mandates for water supply and wastewater, dealing with the Clean Water Act, and how that relates to rates and how it relates to funding. So there was quite a bit of discussion about that. But on a much lighter note and a celebratory note that morning, I was able to introduce Rob Pearson, who received the Lifetime Achievement Award, the Justin Herman Award at the NARO conference. NARO is the National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Organizations. It's basically the national association of all the housing authorities in the country. And so this is their highest honor that they bestow upon someone in the country. And our own Rob Pearson got the honor, and we were able to, I was able to introduce him, and we can celebrate that. And thank goodness we did that first, because right after that was Magic Johnson who spoke. So I was glad I was before and not after Magic Johnson, who was absolutely incredible in the work that he talks about in terms of investing economic development in inner cities and talking about job creation was tremendous. So it brought down the house. But really, I was there for Rob Pearson. So, but it was an honor to be able to introduce him to the group. So thank you for taking that spot on SBCAG and APCD, so I could do that. Okay, and that is it. We don't have any closed sessions, so we are adjourned. Thank you very much.